Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 615, Encounter with the Divine Abomination. Ariana has already concealed our presence, Edward said quietly. Zeridal won't be able to sense us easily. Then he turned to Palez. Old man, your job is to disrupt him as much as you can. Steal his abilities if possible, even his historical projection, if you get the chance. I'll do my best, Palez muttered bitterly. 10 minutes later, all three of them, Edward, Chrismona, and Palez, simultaneously turned their heads in the same direction. Their gazes met briefly, and they each nodded in silent understanding. The fish had entered the net. Zeridal's consciousness gradually returned. As the suffocating darkness receded, he found himself standing in the middle of a black town blanketed in thick, swirling fog. He quickly recalled what had just happened and, without hesitation, attempted to cancel the historical projection and return to his true body. But he failed. Something in this town severed the connection between his projection and his true self. His heart sank, his breathing grew heavier, and a chill ran through his form. So it really was her. He murmured under his breath. But he couldn't understand it. When had he ever offended that being, to the point of drawing a personal strike from her? This was not the time to ponder such things. What mattered now was determining where he was, and how to leave. He extended a hand and summoned 2 historical projections, placing them on guard at his sides. Then, taking out a divination crystal, he began divining the nature of the fog-shrouded town. Nothing. He could glean nothing about this place, not its name, not its dangers, not the path to escape. Still, his spiritual intuition whispered to him that the answer to leaving lay within the small black chapel ahead. With a silent command, the Duke of Entropy's historical projection stepped forward under the effect of exploit, crossed the cobblestone street, and pushed open the chapel's door. Almost instantly, Zeridal felt the link between himself and the Duke's projection snap. Alarmed, he raised a hand to summon another projection. But before he could, a familiar figure appeared before him. She wore a flowing black dress, her features not striking but softened by a faint, serene smile. Good afternoon, Zeridal, she said gently. Chrismona. His mind reeled. How could it be her? The thought had barely formed when a searing pain exploded in his chest. His throat burned like fire, and a wave of weakness crashed through his body. The witch's disease. Even as a historical projection, he wasn't immune to it. He stumbled back, commanding the Weather Warlock's projection to block in front of him, only then realizing that the entire area was already ensnared by countless nearly invisible threads of silk, sealing off every route of retreat. Snap. With a sharp click of his fingers, Zeridal ignited himself into a burst of flame, vanishing from within the web. But that brief delay had drained even more of his strength. He gasped harshly for air, his chest heaving like a bellows. Coughs racked him, and his head swam in dizziness. Desperate, he summoned a demigod from the Jacob family to steal the disease directly from his body. When clarity returned to his mind for a brief instant, Zeridal poured centuries of accumulated wish power into a single plea. I wish to leave this foggy town. In that instant, all his stored power was consumed. His heart ached with the loss, it had taken centuries to gather enough for his ascension to sequence 1, but relief washed through him. At least he was escaping. But before he could draw another breath, a cold voice echoed in the air, speaking a single word in Hermes. Reboot. The moment the word fell, silvery mercury symbols flared to life all around him, weaving together into the shape of a colossal, spectral, scale-less serpent. Its metallic body was covered in intricate runes and rotating sigils, each wheel of symbols interlocked with the next, forming a chain of infinite, ever-turning cycles. Then, the world lurched. Time itself began to rewind. Zeridal's consciousness was yanked backwards, the moment of escape was undone. He found himself once again trapped in the black town, standing right where he had been moments ago. The little serpent, Septon, might have refused to enter the battle directly, but he had made sure Edward was equipped with several reboots. They were safeguards, precisely for a situation like this. Zeridal's heart sank like a stone. He tried once again to wish himself free, but to his horror, he discovered that his miracle invoker abilities had vanished. His spirituality plummeted, his strength rapidly deteriorating. From sequence 2, he fell to sequence 3, and continued to drop, the decline accelerating. This sensation, the feeling of being stripped, drained, devoured, was all too familiar. He had felt it once before, in Trier. When he encountered Amon. So, was Amon the one manipulating everything behind the scenes? That thought had barely formed when a child appeared before Zeridal. His eyes gleamed with ancient, rotating gears, and in his small hand, he held a wooden wand that flickered through the air with blinding speed, leaving trails of ghostly afterimages. Then, all those afterimages raised their wands in perfect unison. Flavito. Petrificus totalis. Stupefy. Steal. Imperio. In an instant, dozens of different types of controlling and stealing spells merged together, cascading toward Zeradal. The moment the first one struck, his mind froze completely, locked in a continuous system crash. Edward seized the opportunity, quickly beginning a divination, only to discover that the attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic was nowhere to be found. He couldn't tell whether Zeradal had failed to steal it, or if he had somehow sent it away through another means. As expected, Edward muttered. Things never go as smoothly as I'd like. Without delay, he used Zeradal's immobilized historical projection as a medium for another divination. Location of Zeradal's true body. A few seconds later, Edward's eyes snapped open. He turned to Crismona and said sharply, "Buy me as much time as you can." Leaving only that brief command, he invoked Hearth, vanishing from the fog-shrouded town. Moments later, his figure reappeared, drifting through the mists until he emerged over a lonely island amid the fog sea, where Zeradal's true body resided. Landing softly on the rocky shore, Edward immediately saw him, a bearded old man in a hooded black robe, sitting silently on a large stone. His eyes were closed, his body utterly still, not a trace of life could be sensed from him. It made perfect sense. Zeradal's consciousness was currently trapped inside his historical projection. What sat before Edward was little more than an empty shell. In the original story, Zeradal had remained in this state for centuries. His true body had teetered on the brink of losing control, his mind fragmented, while his historical projection degenerated into a monster within the fogged town. Such was the inevitable result of a seer pathway beyonder, when body and consciousness became inverted between reality and history. So, Edward whispered, eyes narrowing. If I kill Zeradal's true body now, will it erase him completely and release the relevant characteristics, or will the miracle invoker's powers simply bring him back? He tilted his head thoughtfully. But without consciousness, what would be revived anyway? Just another empty husk. He smiled coldly. In that case, let's skip the suspense and make sure there's no revival at all. He unleashed regression upon Zeradal's true body. At the instant Zeradal's rank began dropping from sequence 2, Edward struck, unleashing a blinding combination of lightning storm, space tearing, and the killing curse all at once. To be frank, Edward had no personal grudge against Zeradal. But at the upper sequences, Ascension was soaked in blood and death. No one could avoid that reality. To reach sequence 2 quickly and find Lilith, he murmured, ice cold, I'll shoulder no moral burden. Boom. Silvery white lightning bolts rained down from the sky, entwined with rending tears in space, while the eerie green light of the Avada Kedavra curse bathed the scene in an unearthly hue. But suddenly, Edward's spirituality screamed a warning. A surge of danger. A moment later, a massive black hand erupted from the ground before Zeradal, its surface slick, pulsing with strange, tar-like liquid that glistened with a malignant luster. From its palm sprouted a pale skull, followed by bloodshot eyes, fanged tongues, and all manner of grotesque, distorted growths. An aura of extreme corruption and madness burst outward like a storm. In the blink of an eye, the ground across the entire island cracked open. Every living thing upon it went still, then collapsed lifelessly. Even the sea surrounding the island for hundreds of meters teemed with floating corpses of fish. This was an attack from the abomination, Sua, in one of its chaotic, semi-dormant states. Edward reacted instantly, slipping behind a phantom door to shield himself from the wave of annihilation. As the world trembled around him, realization struck. Right, in the original timeline, Zeradal cooperated with the Rose school of thought. No wonder he dared leave his true body exposed here. A guttural roar echoed. Gruu. The writhing black arm lashed out, blocking the incoming lightning, the spatial rupture, and the killing curse all at once. In the next heartbeat, the abomination's limb convulsed violently, shrieking in pain before retreating, collapsing back into the ground. Edward smirked. Did you really think I was still that weak little sequence 5 from the future? Even for a sequence 1 archangel, taking those 3 strikes head-on wouldn't be painless. Stepping out from behind the illusory door, he extended his hand towards Zeradal's body, intent on stealing it outright. But then, a gate materialized between them. It was covered in strange, divine sigils that shimmered faintly, and it blocked his theft completely. From the gate's depths, 2 blackened, bark-like hands emerged, thin and gnarled like the roots of a dead tree. The air froze around them. Edward felt a powerful, oppressive force drag at his body and thoughts. He immediately countered it with, unfettered, breaking free from the suppression. Then, with a flick of his hand, he activated another steel, snatching away the intruder's wraith transformation ability and their current chain of thought in one move. Dozens of phantom doors unfolded around him, circling wide to bypass the black gate and strike directly at Zeradal. But just as he was about to reach him, a white-haired middle-aged man appeared out of nowhere. He snatched up Zeradol's limp body and flashed away, slipping into a rift torn open from within the spirit world itself. Steal. Edward cast again, swapping places with him instantly. The middle-aged demigod froze in shock. The gears within Edward's pupils spun rapidly, click click click, and within seconds, the man's rank plummeted straight to sequence 5. At that same moment, every phantom door around them burst into motion, each one an Edward-shaped blur launching attacks from every direction. Boom. The man tried to transform into a wraith and flee, but his body stiffened mid-transformation. His mind went blank, and then bolts of pale lightning struck down from above, shattering him. Half his body turned to charred ash. A magnified killing curse swallowed what remained, and the space-tearing Edward had prepared beneath him detonated, shredding both flesh and soul to vaporized fragments. A high-ranking demigod of the Rose School of Thought was slain on the spot. And at that very moment, from the black gate still standing nearby, another figure, skeletal and robed, 1 foot already stepping out, paused. The future angel, the current sequence 3, king of curses, Baranka, silently withdrew his foot, retreating back into the spirit world without a sound. Nope. Not fighting that. Not today. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 616, Chapter 616, a formidable opponent. A sequence 3 fighting a sequence 4 was, without question, a one-sided slaughter, but to kill one instantly, in the blink of an eye. That was a bit much, even for him. Let's leave an opponent like that to Lord Sua, Baranka thought dryly. Our goal tonight was never to win, just to stall for time. As the demigod from the Rose School of Thought perished, the body of Zeradol that he had been carrying was caught in the lightning storm. Charred and limp, it fell straight downward. And a black hand tore through the air, reaching out to grab him. At once, the dozen or so phantom forms Edward had conjured swarmed in, launching a barrage of attacks against both Zeradol and the abomination Sua. At the same time, the illusory book in Edward's eyes flipped open, its pages glowing faintly with crimson light. He invoked a calamity he had recorded earlier from Chrismona. Catastrophe. With a deafening roar, a colossal meteor wreathed in flame plunged down from the heavens, crashing towards Sua's black, corrupted hand. The abomination reacted instantly, clutching Zeradol tighter and attempting to retreat back into the spirit world. But Edward raised his hand and invoked regression, reversing Sua's movement, just for half a second. It wasn't much. But half a second was all a wanderer needed. In that infinitesimal moment, Edward traversed space several times in succession and wrenched Zeradol's body free from Sua's grasp. The very next heartbeat, Sua broke free from regression's delay. The fog sea erupted with a monstrous, malignant aura. The air thickened, the surrounding space rippled and shattered violently. From those spatial cracks, dozens of immense, bark-covered arms emerged, their surface mottled like rotting tree trunks, reaching hungrily toward Edward. Boom. In an instant, the entire island was obliterated. Hundreds of black arms pierced through it, rending it apart with a thunderous explosion. The land crumbled into fragments and sank into the depths of the sea. But Edward was long gone, he and Zeradol had already slipped into the astral realm. Among the 22 Beyonder pathways, each had its unique strengths. But when it came to the divine art of escaping, the door pathway was second to none. Even the might of an abomination couldn't bridge the gulf between worlds. Come chase me into the astral realm, if you can, Edward thought with a smirk. Let's see how that goes. But before the thought even faded, Zeradol's eyes suddenly snapped open. The confusion in them was quickly consumed by madness, a wild, feral fury. Edward felt his body stiffen. A chilling force seized control of his limbs, the control of spirit threads. Without hesitation, he stepped through the void, traversing space to break free before Zeradol could fully seize him. Then, invoking, unfettered, several times in rapid succession, he severed the control entirely, purging from his body the worms of spirit that Zeradol had implanted to turn him into a marionette. The wriggling, glimmering worm fell into Edward's grasp. Worm of spirit, acquired. A flash of satisfaction crossed his face. Without missing a beat, he surged back into the astral realm, his wand already raised. The green light of the killing curse gleamed at its tip. Avada Kedavra. Zeradol, though insane, was not completely devoid of self-preservation. He yanked a historical projection out of the past to block the curse, then burst into flames and leapt behind Edward, unleashing a barrage of air cannons from his mouth. The blasts were deafening, the attacks of a Sequence 3 air cannon were comparable to coastal defense artillery, and at Sequence 2, their destructive power only multiplied. The invisible shockwaves battered Edward's phantasmal doors, causing it to crack and splinter. The barrier wouldn't hold much longer. Magnify, steal. Edward's pupils gleamed with the spinning of ancient gears. He reached out, and the theft succeeded effortlessly. The spirit thread control ability was stolen directly from Zeradol. Normally, even Amon himself would struggle to steal such a deeply integrated Sequence 2 ability in a single attempt. A seer's danger sense would trigger instantly, allowing them to swap places with a marionette or escape via miracles. But Zeradol, consumed by insanity, had likely forgotten all about his marionettes, or perhaps he had simply lost them in his earlier battle with Antigonus. And without his marionettes, a seer's survival capability plummeted sharply. Zeradol's dimming eyes flickered with a shred of awareness. His body tensed, then he summoned 3 historical projections from his past all at once. 2 of them were the same Sequence 2 entities from before. But the third was an old man in a black robe, his features eerily similar to Zeradol's own, though more weathered and ancient. The moment he appeared, Edward's expression changed. That oppressive, suffocating feeling of having his spirit body thread seized returned, and this time, even faster than before. This one, could it be the late Zeradol Sr.? A Sequence 1, the OG Zeradol. At the same time, the 2 Sequence 2 historical projections lunged forward, launching simultaneous attacks from both sides. One of Zeradol's historical projections distorted Edward's very thoughts of escaping, redirecting the concept of wandering into a barrage of compressed air blasts that shot toward him, and then amplified its own actions with magnify. Another projection seized control of the surrounding weather. Dense fog rose from the astral sea, torrential rain poured down, and thunder roared across the dark expanse, each strike infused with cull, each flash of lightning carrying enough force to shatter a mountain. As for Zeradol's true body, he stayed far away, relentlessly firing air cannons from a distance. Even in a half-mad, semi-conscious state, his instinct to stay alive ran bone deep. It was as if the word cowardice had been engraved into his very spirituality. Reboot. Edward's mind twisted under the dual onslaught of distorted thoughts and Sequence 1 level spirit body thread control. He knew gambling on, unfettered, would be too risky now. Instead, he seized the split-second window created by the distortion and decisively triggered reboot. Once again, the scale-less silver serpent appeared, its body composed of countless interlocking mercury runes. Each rune flared to life, forming a chain of spinning, connected wheels, and the flow of time in that region began to rewind. The invasive spirit threads, the twisted thoughts, the shifting weather, the raging air cannons, all reversed at once, their effects unraveling backwards in time. Even the 3 historical projections began to fade, dissolving into the void. Edward transformed into more than a dozen phantom doors, surrounding Zeradol and his projections in a perfect formation. The ancient gears in his eyes spun faster and faster until the 3 projections froze mid-motion, then accelerated backwards, vanishing completely into the gaps of history within seconds. Zeradol tried to summon more, to repeat his trick, but Edward struck first, stealing his current chain of thought, then turning Zeradol's own spirit body thread manipulation against him. In an instant, Zeradol's body stiffened, his limbs locked in place, unable to move. But when Edward tried to push further, he realized the stolen ability was limited. It could only paralyze, not create. After all, a seer's marionette creation required splitting off a portion of their worms of spirit and channeling it through the spirit body threads into another vessel to complete the transformation. Edward's worms of star were of a different essence entirely. They couldn't reproduce the same effect. Even so, a flurry of killing curses struck Zeradol square in the face. Edward attempted to follow up with another theft, aiming to snatch his historical projection ability. But this time, failure. Snap. A sound that didn't exist in physical reality echoed across the astral realm, the sound of spirit threads breaking. The control snapped. Zeradol's body convulsed as he broke free. Several curses struck him point blank, draining his vitality and dimming his aura. He could tell, a few more of those, and even a Sequence 2 like him would die. The next moment, his body twisted, turning into a paper figurine, which crumbled into ash and vanished. Then a burst of flames erupted elsewhere as he reappeared far away, fleeing at full speed without hesitation. He had pushed his flaming jump ability to its limit, but even that couldn't compare to Edward's single step of wandering. Still, the maneuver bought him time to summon again. 2 Sequence 2s. 1 Sequence 1. 3 historical projections surrounded him in perfect defense. None of them attacked. They merely guarded him, retreating in unison as Zeradol fled deeper into the astral darkness. Whenever Edward emerged from the void, he was immediately met with a storm of overlapping attacks, lightning, air pressure, curses, and spiritual distortion all crashing down in concert. Every time he attempted a counter, the projections intercepted him in suicidal fashion, their purpose only to delay, to protect. Edward found himself frowning. This isn't right. Could Zeradol's consciousness have already returned to his true body? If this weakened, half-insane version of Zeradol was already this troublesome, then how in the hell would he fight the real, fully conscious one, complete with puppets? If I don't take him down now, he thought grimly, I'll never get the miracle invoker characteristic from him again. Just as that thought flashed through his mind, an idea sparked. Edward stepped out of a phantom door, blocking Zeradol's path. His voice echoed across the astral realm, Zeradol. I only want the extra miracle invoker characteristic in your possession. Hand it over, and I'll leave this instant. The response came as a violent barrage of attacks. Edward retreated into another gate, then reappeared several meters away, leaving behind flickering afterimages as he continued to speak. Zeradal, maintaining 3 historical projections at once must be draining your spirituality fast, isn't it? When your spirituality runs out and you can't summon them anymore, how do you plan to defend yourself then? He paused, voice steady and cold. I'll repeat it one more time. I only want that spare characteristic. That's all. Boom. 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 Doors after doors shattered under the bombardment. The last one exploded into shards of light. But Edward had already moved again. Seconds later, he reappeared, voice calm, mocking. You think my spirituality drains as fast as yours, don't you? That may be true, if I keep attacking. But what if I don't? What if I just keep my distance, and every so often, pop in to harass you? I could conserve my spirituality, while you'd still be forced to maintain your projections. Tell me, Zeradal, who do you think will last longer? He reached into his space pocket and pulled out a shining golden cup. Hufflepuff's cup, he said with a grin. An artifact that restores spirituality. You can divine for yourself if I'm lying. I'll say this once more, I only want the miracle invoker characteristic. The extra one you're holding. Giving it up won't cost you anything. If Zeradal had still been lucid, he would have screamed in rage, you bastard. What the hell are you talking about? I am the miracle invoker. Handing over the characteristic means I die. What you want isn't my spare trait, it's the attendant of mysteries characteristic I just stole. Indeed, Edward had misunderstood. He remembered that Zeradal possessed an extra miracle invoker characteristic, but forgot that the surplus had been produced when Zeradal used the attendant of mysteries characteristic to concoct his sequence 1 potion. But even if Edward knew that, it wouldn't have changed a thing. His words were just another weapon, an attempt at manipulation, at stalling, at talking his way into an advantage. And then, a pale mist began to drift in from nowhere, curling like breath over still water. The once endless black of the astral realm dimmed further, tinged with faint, ominous hues of red. In the next heartbeat, Zeradal's spirituality quivered violently. Danger. Danger. This was no ordinary omen, it was the sharpest, most terrifying premonition he had ever felt since becoming a seer. One thought resounded through every fiber of his being, go no further. One more step, and I die. Note, vote if you liked the chapter so far, he, you guys are so gonna regret missing that extra chapter today, ha ha ha. Chapter 617, Amon. The unconscious body of Zeradal was indeed in a half-mad, half-out-of-control state, but even so, it still possessed an intense instinct to survive. In that instant, it stopped in its tracks. Seeing Edward rapidly closing in, the half-mad Zeradal made a rare, rational decision. He reached into his robes and pulled out an object resembling a vortex of writhing, shadowy worms. Then, under the triple amplification of distortion, magnify, and exploit from the historical projection of the Duke of Entropy, Zeradal hurled it forward with all his strength. Edward's heart jolted. Catching a glimpse of Zeradal turning tail and fleeing in the opposite direction, he didn't hesitate for another second. His figure flickered, and in the next moment, he traversed space to intercept. He appeared right before the flying object, raising a hand to block it with an illusory door. The projectile slammed into the shimmering barrier and was instantly halted, the same blow that could have blown apart even a demigod. The attendant of mysteries is beyond her characteristic, secured. Retreat. Edward immediately sensed the terrifying danger surrounding this place. Without hesitation, he prepared to activate Hearth to leave. But then, a soft, whispering voice brushed against his ear, gentle yet intoxicating, are you truly not going to take a look at me before deciding whether to leave? That voice carried an irresistible charm. Edward froze mid-action, his escape spell fading from his thoughts as his gaze was drawn toward the direction of the voice. There, he saw a colossal woman, over 10 meters tall, clad in a gown seemingly woven from white bone. Her black hair writhed like a mass of venomous serpents, long, thick, glistening, and at their tips, some bore actual snake heads, while others rolled their black and white eyes. Her face, no, her visage, surpassed the beauty of all things that existed. It wasn't mere appearance, her beauty transcended the concept of beauty itself. Even if she had been hideous, others would still perceive her as breathtakingly beautiful. In this moment, this woman was beauty itself. Just as the sequence 0 of the door pathway embodied the concept of door, this woman was the conceptual embodiment of beauty. As she walked forward, her body gradually shrank in size. By the time she stopped before Edward, she was of the same height as him. With a gentle smile, she lifted one slender, pale finger and hooked it under his chin. Good boy, she murmured, her voice both teasing and divine. Leaning closer, she inhaled lightly beside his neck. Yes, that scent, definitely from the City of Calamity. Edward's mind snapped clear in an instant. Cold terror swept through him. Before he could even summon the thought of hearth again, the woman's tender voice rang once more. Even if I can't stop you from fleeing, these little ones will follow you, and in an instant, they'll tear your body and soul apart. Edward's pupils shrank. Only now did he notice that his entire body had been pierced through by dozens of black, snake-like tendrils. Each tendril ended in an eye, some closed, some open, and every one of them radiated an intense, corrupting power. As he looked down, one of the open eyes met his gaze. Instantly, he felt something within his body begin to twist. His height rose rapidly, his chest swelled, and the bones of his face and skull subtly shifted. Edward had turned into a woman. And in that moment, her identity became undeniable. The primordial demoness, Cheek. No wonder Zeradal had so decisively thrown away the attendant of mysteries as beyond her characteristic. As the saying goes, when being chased by a bear, you don't need to outrun the bear, you just need to run faster than the other person. Zeradal had, quite literally, tossed Edward straight into the bear's mouth. Not bad at all. Cheek's slender fingers traced along Edward's cheek, admiration flickering in her gaze. If your answer pleases me, I wouldn't mind helping you switch to the demoness pathway, and become an angel under my command. Edward's lips twitched slightly. I actually think being a man is just fine. Cheek's red lips curved into a charming smile. But you're already a woman now, aren't you? Fuck you. Cheek's slender, alabaster fingers gently caressed Edward's cheek. Now, tell me, where is Lilith? What is she truly planning? That enchanting voice once again seeped into Edward's ears, as though whispering directly to his soul. For a moment, the urge to answer truthfully nearly overwhelmed him, but the continuous activation of Unfettered weakened the charm's effect. Gritting his teeth, enduring the excruciating pain of resisting that supernatural allure, Edward shouted two names at the top of his lungs. Leodoro. Aucuses. Cheek froze for a heartbeat, then suddenly burst into melodious laughter. How naively adorable. Do you really think that merely speaking their names will make them attack me here, in my own divine kingdom? Edward bared his teeth in a grin. Why not? Suddenly, streaks of dazzling silver-white lightning descended from the sky. Bolts of thunder branched out like the limbs of a colossal tree, enveloping the surrounding hundreds of meters into a roaring forest of lightning. The aura of annihilation and ruin became so tangible it seemed to weigh upon the soul itself. In that instant, an apocalyptic pressure fell from above. Cheek's pupils contracted sharply, her expression shifting to disbelief as she lifted her head. Leodoro, you actually dare. But as the first bolt of lightning struck, she immediately realized something was wrong. The thunder lacked the tyrannical might of that true tyrant. At best, it carried only the spiritual weight of a Sequence 2 being, a mere imitation cloaked in false grandeur. You little trickster, she hissed. And in the very next instant, Edward's figure vanished, dissolved by the activation of Hearth. The smile faded from Cheek's flawless face, replaced by a calm, tranquil expression. Lilith, big sister, she murmured, her tone chillingly soft. Why can't you just die peacefully? The Evernight Goddess's divine kingdom. The moment Edward appeared within the boundless darkness, the tendrils piercing through his body began to swell and writhe violently, transforming into wriggling black serpents that sought to shred both his flesh and soul. He curled up in agony, desperately summoning thunder and theft to resist the invasive serpents within him, but the effect was minimal. He could feel his strength rapidly fading, death closing in by the second. Disease, poison, curses, and the gnawing of venomous snakes, all erupted within him simultaneously. Just as Cheek had said, his body and soul were being torn apart from within. Struggling to his feet, he glanced around at the serene darkness filled with moonflowers and night-blooming herbs, then gritted his teeth and shouted. End summoning. Gray-white mist surged up around him. In the blink of an eye, Edward returned to the Sapphira Castle. He stumbled and collapsed onto the bronze seat, his body battered and broken. Those black serpents continued devouring his flesh and soul from within, sending waves of unbearable pain through him, so intense that his consciousness nearly dissolved. The Sapphira Castle trembled violently. Pillars crumbled, gardens overturned, and the eternal, resplendent palace collapsed into ruins. Amon's birdcage swayed wildly amidst the tremors, swinging back and forth as though on a pendulum. Bang! Edward's body suddenly exploded, shattering into countless fragments. Each fragment was composed of one or more squirming worms of stars, glimmering faintly with celestial light. The fragments scattered across the floor, then, under the influence of aggregation, slowly converged toward one point, the attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic. After a long moment, Edward's form reassembled, still retaining the appearance of a woman. Panting heavily, he thrust a hand into his chest, forcibly extracting the attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic and tossing it onto the bronze round table. My, you've certainly developed quite a unique taste. Amon's mocking voice drifted out from the birdcage, brimming with schadenfreude. First a child, now a woman. Shut up. Edward struggled to prop himself upright, collapsing forward onto the cold bronze table. Every nerve screamed in pain, he could still feel those serpentine tendrils twisting deep within his body. Still, based on the original account of Klein's repeated experiments within the Sapphire Castle, Edward knew, unless the damage exceeded the castle's endurance, he should remain immortal here. Amon's tone turned casual. Weren't you off hunting Zeradol? How on earth did you end up provoking Cheek? I told you to shut. Edward forced himself to sit up straight, but then froze. His eyes locked on the man sitting leisurely across from him. The figure wore a monocle upon a broad forehead and a black, old-fashioned coat, legs crossed in casual ease. Edward's pupils dilated. Amon was sitting there, outside the birdcage, holding the cage by its handle, smiling pleasantly. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, he said, his tone almost cheerful. Edward's breathing quickened, his mind reeling. How could you possibly escape that birdcage? Even if you'd found a loophole, you couldn't have broken the restraint with just a clone's power. Then, as realization struck, his pupils shrank. Your. Snap. Amon snapped his fingers lightly. Correct. But unfortunately, no prize. Adjusting his translucent monocle, he smiled faintly and said, That's right. I'm Amon's true body. From beginning to end, it's always been me. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 618, the Sapphire Castle changes hands. Edward immediately tried to flip a coin. But nothing happened, his fingers brushed against air. In the very next instant, he felt his entire body spiral out of control. Amon had possessed him. Why, Amon said with a faint smile, idly toying with a gold coin between his fingers, did you ever think I'd give you the chance to flip a coin in the first place? The corners of his mouth curved upward in amusement. From the very first day I entered the Sapphire Castle, I noticed something odd. Each time you flipped a coin, you invoked some unknown power that forcibly sealed me inside that birdcage. And afterwards, whenever you infused me with humanity, you still had to toss that same coin. He flicked a gold coin into the air with a clear ding and rested his chin lazily on one hand, watching Edward with a mischievous glint in his eyes. So, that ability of yours, its prerequisite must be the coin flip, right? Edward glared coldly at him. Heh, and what if I was just deceiving you? Amon spread his hand, his smile deepening. Then, please, by all means, put on your performance. After being cooped up in that cage for so long, I've almost forgotten what freedom feels like. Go on, send me back. Edward coughed violently, blood flecking his lips. The tearing pain in his soul flared once more. Considering I'm in a good mood today after obtaining a Beyonder characteristic, I'll let you off this once. Now get the hell out of here. Ah, Amon sighed regretfully, shaking his head. How many times do I have to tell you? You're just not very convincing when you try to act tough. Edward sneered. Since you're so certain I'm bluffing, why are you still standing here wasting time with me? Amon's grin widened. Because, after spending so much time together, I've come to think of us as half-friends. And friends can negotiate, can't they? Negotiate. Edward laughed derisively. You're this confident that you've already got me cornered, yet you still talk about negotiation. If there's something you want, why not just take it? No, Amon wagged a finger. It's different. You willingly handing over the Sapphire Castle isn't the same as me forcibly taking it. Edward's eyes narrowed slightly. I see now. You want to seize control of the Sapphire Castle, but leave me to shoulder all the responsibility and consequences, don't you? Indeed, that was exactly Amon's habit. In the original history, he'd lingered in the forsaken land of the gods with Klein for ages, all to avoid bearing responsibility. Perhaps in the future, Amon would be an active savior, but in the world of mysteries, he had always been one who shirked it completely. You could say that, Amon admitted without shame. But don't feel too pressured. As long as I succeed in ascending as the Lord of Mysteries and drive away the outer gods, you won't actually have to bear much of anything. You could even serve under me as a great angel. What do you say? Not interested. Ah, why so stubborn? Amon sighed, shaking his head in mock sorrow. I really thought we were getting along rather well lately. Edward let out a cold laugh. The only good Amon is one inside the cage. Once you're out, you're nothing but a walking catastrophe. Your misunderstanding of me, Amon replied with exaggerated melancholy, is truly profound. Leaning back comfortably, he rubbed his chin in thought. How about this? I'll grant you a condition. Anything you want. You have my word. Really? Edward's gaze sharpened. Then leave the Sapphire Castle. Right now. Unfettered. Edward suddenly broke free from the parasitic control. In one smooth motion, he manifested a paper figurine and pressed it against his chest, activating Angel's embrace for protection. His form split into dozens of afterimages, each surrounded by phantom doors. At that same instant, he triggered multiple abilities simultaneously, and flipped a coin. TCH. How troublesome. Amon pinched his monocle lightly, then extended a single hand. All of the airborne coins vanished into his palm in an instant. The monocle flashed faintly with light. He reached out once more, swapping positions with one of the projected Edwards. The next second, Edward found himself engulfed by his own barrage of unleashed attacks. He immediately retreated into an illusory door, rapidly traversing through space and tossing out another coin. But before it even hit the ground, his mind went blank. When consciousness returned, he was seated once more upon the bronze chair of the Sapphire Castle. His wandering and space concealment abilities had completely vanished. Strange. Amon murmured thoughtfully, tapping his chin. Why is it that all those strange abilities you've mastered, I can't steal a single one of them? If you keep refusing me, I might just have to perform a deep-level parasitism, and create a new Amon to properly study your body. You're welcome to try, Edward said coldly. As he spoke, illusory pages turned in his pupils, and a small, scaleless serpent biting its own tail appeared in his eyes. He invoked Reboot, for the third time, recorded from the Snake of Mercury. A gigantic phantom of that silvery serpent appeared behind him, the aura of the Sapphire Castle's master surging forth. The flow of time reversed violently. Everything that had occurred moments ago began rewinding. Edward's stolen abilities were restored. But before the reversal had fully settled, Amon once again stretched out his hand toward him. At the same time, Edward mirrored the gesture, activating theft on Amon. Amon couldn't help but find the situation amusing. Using a recorded theft to steal from the progenitor of thieves himself. How absurdly naive. Yet before the smirk could fully form, his expression froze. He felt it, the sensation of his fate being pried open, thin strands of destiny forcibly peeled away. This brat actually succeeded, he completed the theft, and at the level of fate itself. Amon instantly triggered deception to fool the effect, then reached up to adjust his monocle. Only to blink in confusion. Huh. Amon paused. Where's my monocle? Amon's head snapped toward Edward, only to see the men smiling faintly at him, eyes gleaming with mischief. Perched upon Edward's right eye was a crystal monocle, Amon's monocle. That was the uniqueness of the Marauder pathway. For once, even Amon froze in disbelief. Me, Amon, Sequence 1 of the Marauder pathway, possessor of the pathway's uniqueness and 2 Sequence 1 beyonder characteristics, actually had my uniqueness stolen. By a man merely recording the theft ability. His first reaction was absurd amusement, but it quickly shifted into a sharp, unfamiliar dread, a sense of crisis so intense that even when facing gods, he had never felt its like. I already gave you a chance, Amon. Edward mimicked Amon's posture, holding the crystalline monocle with an easy, almost mocking gesture. If you'd stolen my destiny the moment you acted, it would have all ended there. But no, you wanted to inherit the Sapphire Castle without shouldering any responsibility. He smiled thinly. So tell me, why do you think that in my own territory, I could best you once, but not twice? The swimmer drowns, the rider falls, and the thief. Edward's eyes glinted coldly. The thief dies from being stolen from. Are you satisfied with that ending? Amon raised both hands dramatically. I surrender. I yield. I'll behave and go back into the birdcage like a good little raven. Do you really think I'd keep a powder keg beside me that could explode at any moment? Amon smiled with easy humor. Why not? After all, I no longer pose any threat to you, and keeping me around means you'd have someone who can answer all sorts of tricky questions. Doesn't that sound useful? Sorry, Edward replied coolly. I don't need you. Ah, then I suppose this is goodbye. Amon let his arms fall to his sides and sighed softly. Reboot. City of Trier, number 7 Rose Street. In a small room, the little serpent will scratched his head in puzzlement. Why do I feel like, even though I wasn't there, I've somehow played a massive role in a matter of tremendous importance? He tilted his head thoughtfully. Is it because of my luck bonus? He frowned. Weird. Inside the Sapphire Castle. Everything began to flow backwards again. Just as Edward had used Reboot earlier to retrieve the abilities Amon stole, Amon now used the same method to reclaim his own uniqueness. The crystal monocle reappeared upon Amon's right eye. Good thing I'd stolen a little reboot of fate just in case, he murmured. Otherwise, that would have been the end of me. Edward's expression changed drastically, his body tensing for action. But before he could move, the Sapphire Castle itself began to quake violently. The endless gray-white mist roiled and churned as if roaring in furious protest. At the same time, Edward felt a terrible weakness wash over him, as though something precious beyond measure was being ripped out of his very being. No. Amon's voice was calm, almost casual. Your Sapphire Castle, I'll be taking it. It's a matter of life and death, he thought. Better to steal first and deal with the consequences later. As for the fate and responsibility that come with it, I'll figure that out afterwards. Boom. The Sapphira Castle shook violently. The gardens wreathed in grey fog crumbled inch by inch, the ancient bronze round table splintered into several fragments, leaving deep craters in the ground. The floor cracked open, spiderweb fissures leaking streams of pale mist. In a single instant, everything shattered. The grand castle was reduced to nothing but endless, boundless grey fog. Edward's body flickered, his form shrinking and twisting, until he returned to the shape of a child. Simultaneously, Amon's form shifted as well. He had even stolen Edward's transformation into a woman. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, the mist slowly receded. The Sapphira Castle began to repair itself, gradually, deliberately, but it did not return to the small, peaceful garden Edward had once built. Instead, it became a vast, majestic, ancient palace, grand and oppressive in its divine weight. In the spirit world, 7 radiant lights gathered together, sometimes flickering brightly, sometimes dimming, as if in anxious uncertainty for what the future held. It had been less than 2 months since the last enthronement of the Lord of the Spirit World, and now the position had changed hands again. The 7 lights could not foresee whether this was good or ill. In the astral world, within the divine kingdom of the Earth Mother, the goddess of harvest Lilith suddenly stopped mid-step. Golden wheat and clear springs bloomed beneath her feet as she turned her gaze toward a distant point. So, Amon succeeded after all, she murmured softly. What a pity. In the steam and machinery divine kingdom, the robust god of steam, Stiano, stood before an anvil, hammering a strange metal into the shape of a gear. His muscular arms gleamed with divine power. Suddenly, the hammer froze midair. His brows furrowed. Dead. In the dusk of decay, upon the crumbling throne, the god of combat lifted his gaze slightly toward the void, then lowered it again in silence. In the realm of fire and thunder, disasters raged as ever, endless lightning and infernal flames, unchanged by the shifting heavens. Beneath an ancient tree, the god of knowledge and wisdom sat leaning against its trunk, brows drawn tight in deep thought. And in that tranquil darkness blanketed by moonflowers and night vanillas, a woman dressed in a starlit gown, her body half immersed in a flowing river of light, opened her eyes. Within them flickered faint surprise. Within the secret palace atop Mount Hornassus, Antigonus, from whom Zeradal had just stolen an attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic, descended once again into madness. He roared, trying desperately to break free from the palace's confines. On a primitive island within the fog sea, a modest, golden-eyed priest stepped out from an abandoned chapel. Calmly, he gazed ahead. A parchment and quill appeared in his hands. He thought for a few seconds, then wrote a single sentence upon the parchment. The moment the words were formed, both parchment and quill shattered into dust, leaving no trace behind. Adam's golden eyes rippled faintly. Then, let's wait a little longer, he whispered. Meanwhile, across the vast starry heavens, the outer gods all sensed the shift of authority within the Sapphira Castle. Among them, Mr. Dor hung suspended in the cosmic void, gazing down upon the blue planet below. His eyes alternated between cold rationality and gentle madness. Amon. And then, the blood moon rose once more. Note, 255 power stones for an extra chapter tomorrow. Go, vote. Rate this cliffhanger from 1 to 10. Heh. Chapter 619, the ritual completed. Inside the Sapphira Castle, Edward lay sprawled on the ground, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Tilting his head upward, he gazed at the transformation unfolding before his eyes. His sight pierced through the swirling white mist, reaching into the deepest recesses of the space, where countless, human figures hung suspended in a vast, enigmatic chamber. That hidden space trembled violently, and all those hanging forms swayed along with it, as though at any moment they might break free and crash to the ground. Amon stood nearby, arms folded across a newly rounded chest, the crystalline monocle glittering on her right eye. Her expression remained calm and composed, as if she were inspecting her own domain. She didn't seem to care in the slightest that she now wore the form of a woman, for to Amon, gender had never carried any meaning. When the Sapphira Castle finally began to quiet down, Amon lowered her head slightly, the corners of her lips curving faintly as she looked at Edward. Perhaps I overestimated the cost of bearing the Sapphira Castle's burden, she said softly. I should have made my move earlier. Edward pushed himself up on one arm, then sat upright with a weak smile. Congratulations. Congratulations. Amon chuckled, genuinely amused. I just took your Sapphira Castle, and you're congratulating me. What is this, flattery? Are you hoping I'll spare your life and let you serve as one of my angels? Even as she spoke, she extended her will, attempting to parasitize him again. There's always something wrong when someone acts too calm. No. Edward's voice was quiet, but steady. I told you long ago, I was never interested in becoming the lord of the Sapphira Castle. I only thought it was a convenient tool to use. When I advanced to Sequence 3 and truly became its master, that was something I hadn't even planned for. So now that it's been taken away, honestly, I feel relieved. My congratulations, he continued, his tone gentle but cutting, are for something else entirely, because, compared to before, you're no longer so afraid of taking responsibility. Maybe it's because I gave you a touch of humanity. Maybe it's because you've grown attached to this world. Or maybe, you were never truly without humanity to begin with, nor as terrified of responsibility as you claimed. Aman laughed softly, pushing her monocle higher on her face. Then you're going to be disappointed. Aman is still Aman, and will always be Aman. Edward's gaze remained calm, almost piercing. If you had two choices before you, becoming the Lord of Mysteries, or resurrecting the ancient sun god, which would you choose? Of course, wow. Aman began to answer reflexively, but the words stopped midway. She tilted her head, lips curling into a faint smirk. What a pointless question. Taking a few steps closer, she said lightly. You'd better worry about yourself instead. Do you have any idea what kind of end awaits you now? Actually, Edward said, his tone unreadable, I think letting you become the Lord of Mysteries might not be such a bad thing after all. He reached into himself and stole out the worm of time Aman had used to parasitize him. But unfortunately, he added, that would make the future a complete mess. What? Before Aman could process the words, she launched another round of theft, snatching at Edward's thoughts, his powers, even attempting a deeper parasitism. But the thoughts she stole were incomprehensible, mere fragments of phrases repeating one after another. Madman to the right. Madman to the right. Madman to the right. What does that mean? The thought had barely formed when Aman suddenly felt a violent sense of expulsion tearing through her body. Everything in her vision was rushing away, her form turning transparent. The Sapphira Castle is rejecting me. In that instant, the once calm Sapphira Castle began to shake violently again. From afar, Aman saw Edward rise to his feet. He stood still, merely watching her, expression serene, as if he had foreseen this exact moment all along. Grayish-white mist surged from all directions, filling Aman's field of vision. In that final moment before her figure was engulfed, a sudden clarity struck her, and she shouted 4 questions, voice echoing through the collapsing space. You knew from the start that I was the real body. You foresaw all of this happening today. Everything was part of your plan. What is it you're really after? Edward stood tall within the grand, towering palace, gazing down at her with a faint smile. Correct, he said softly. But unfortunately, there's no reward. In the next instant, the mist dispersed. When Aman blinked again, she was standing alone, adrift in the boundless starry sky of the astral world. The connection she had just established with the Sapphira Castle, barely 3 minutes old, had vanished completely. For a long moment, Aman stood there in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a chuckle escaped her lips. How entertaining. Oh. Aman. What brings you to my domain? A lilting, bewitching voice broke the stillness. Aman turned toward it, and for a brief instant, even she found herself entranced. A breathtakingly beautiful woman approached with languid grace, every movement dripping with charm that eclipsed the stars themselves. The primordial demoness, cheek. Weakness. A suffocating, all-consuming weakness was slowly devouring him. It wasn't like the frailty he'd felt after losing the Sapphira Castle. That earlier weakness had merely stripped him of a powerful tool, reducing him to an ordinary sequence 3. But this was different. This time, the weakness came from the steady erosion of his life force itself. Edward could feel it clearly, his vitality was draining away, his existence inching closer and closer toward death. This was the price of using Madman to the right, without the Sapphira Castle's protection. And for the first time, the cost had manifested in a tangible, deadly form. It was no longer about triggering external dangers or inviting indirect calamities, it was the direct, fatal consumption of his own life. By using Madman to the right to forcibly reverse reality, he had stripped the current lord of the Sapphira Castle of his authority, a being who was, at this moment, a powerful king of angels. Edward had long anticipated that this would not come without a price. He staggered forward, step by step, and collapsed into the high-backed chair opposite the fool's seat at the grand bronze table. A faint smile tugged at his pale lips. He had done it. He had turned a widely known event into a falsehood. The ritual was complete. Edward had prepared a double layer of insurance for the ritual. The first layer, using Aman's hand to strip himself of the title of Lord of the Sapphira Castle. His ascension as the castle's master had been a publicly acknowledged event, something known across the higher ranks of existence. The moment Aman forcibly took that authority away from him, the fact that Edward was the Lord of the Sapphira Castle became false. The second layer, after Aman became the new master, Edward immediately used Madman to the right to reverse that reality once more, turning yet another universally known truth into falsehood. He couldn't be certain whether the ritual's success had come from the first act or the second, but one thing was clear. The advancement ritual for Sequence 2 was complete. The idea had first come to him in the Sapphire Castle itself, at the moment he learned that Lilith was trapped in the mirror world, unable to return. At that time, Edward had tried directly using Madman to the right to reverse his identity as the Sapphire Castle's master, but it failed. It made sense, in hindsight. Using the castle's own grafted powers to shoulder the burden of Madman to the right, while simultaneously using that same ability to deny his ownership of the castle, it was a paradox, self-contradictory at its core. After much thought, he had shifted his focus to Amon. Edward had begun suspecting that the Amon before him was the true body during one particular attempt to deconstruct Amon's monocle inside the Sapphire Castle. In that process, he had discovered traces of the authority of error, the very foundation of the monocle's composition. Every clone of Amon wore a monocle and could use the powers of error, yes, but the uniqueness of the authority of error should logically belong only to the true body. Handing it to a clone would be asking for rebellion. That suspicion had driven him to test the theory through divination, and the result had confirmed it. From that moment, the plan began to take shape. Every day thereafter, Edward had used Madman to the right once, Amon thought he was, injecting humanity into him again and again, but in truth, Edward was laying the groundwork for Amon's escape, subtly influencing his thoughts bit by bit, making him believe everything was proceeding according to his own plan. Until, finally, the appearance of the miracle invoker, attendant of mysteries, beyond her characteristic, the signal Edward had been waiting for, the sign that Amon would take action. Even then, Amon had been overly cautious. Even with the Sapphire Castle right before him, he still tried to take it without paying the price, just as he once did with Klein, trying to make Edward bear both fate and consequence. So Edward turned that caution against him. Using the fragmentary authority of error he had acquired through Sapphire Castle reversals, an authority that could only function within the castle, he stole Amon's uniqueness to corner him, forcing Amon to act rashly and seize the Sapphire Castle outright. Yes, the plan had been perilous, full of uncertainty and possible death. But Edward had no better option. Lilith was still trapped in the perilous mirror world, her life and death unknown. He needed to ascend to Sequence 2 as soon as possible to find her. Even if things went wrong, even if it all collapsed, he could still use Madman to the right to force his own death, then revive himself through his recorded memories. It was a gamble, a mad gamble. But after all, hadn't he grown quite accustomed to madness back when he played the role of a madman? As for the divination needed to trigger Madman to the right. Who said divination had to involve coins, or crystals, or astrolabes? Those flashy coin tosses in front of Amon were nothing more than misdirection. Amon certainly knew that at a sufficiently high sequence, divination required no tools, but what of it? Knowing wouldn't change a thing. The moment Amon completed his theft of the Sapphire Castle, Edward was already capable of reversing everything through Madman to the right. He had merely delayed it, since Amon wasn't rushing to act, Edward had gladly let him take full ownership, ensuring the event of Amon becoming the lord of the Sapphire Castle became even more widely acknowledged. And then, at the very instant Amon succeeded, Edward reversed it all. Phew. Edward exhaled deeply, fighting against the waves of nausea and pain tearing through his body. His life was still slipping away. He knew that if this continued, death was inevitable. He had to admit, the price of using Madman to the right this time had completely exceeded his expectations. There was only one solution he could think of, immediate advancement. He had to ascend to Sequence 2, to gain greater vitality and longevity, only then could he resist this withering death. Fitting, isn't it? He muttered, bracing himself against the table. After everything I've done, after all that risk, it was all for this very moment. He glanced once more at the grand hall shrouded in grey mist. Hey, maybe the Sapphire Castle's throwing a tantrum. After having its master changed twice in a row, it didn't even re-recognize me when Amon left. Or maybe, he added dryly, it's telling me to start the whole damn process over next time. But he knew it wasn't worth it. Getting the Sapphire Castle back into a masterless state had been difficult enough, trying again would be nearly impossible. So this ending was good enough. With a calm, untroubled smile, Edward turned and stepped away, leaving the space behind. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 620, Advancing to Sequence. Astral Realm. Within the Harvest Divine Kingdom of the Earth Mother. The moment Edward stepped onto that fertile golden land, his knees buckled and he stumbled forward, collapsing face first into the sea of ripened wheat and rice. He let out a low groan, then simply rolled onto his back, lying there among the soft stalks, staring blankly at the golden sky above. Before long, the Earth Mother appeared within his field of vision. Her face was serene, lips curved in a gentle smile. I knew Amon wouldn't take you down that easily. Edward forced himself to sit up, every muscle trembling with fatigue. Unfortunately, he said hoarsely, Amon did succeed. I'm no longer the lord of the Sapphire Castle, and honestly, I might die at any moment. The Earth Mother inclined her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over him. Your condition does look rather dire. Edward managed a weak grin. Your Grace, I'm no longer the master of the Sapphira Castle, nor am I the so-called future Lord of Mysteries. Would you still be willing to lend me a hand? Her soft chuckle carried a note of amusement. Of course. Edward immediately reached into his coat and pulled out a pitch-black, writhing object, a vortex-like cluster of darkness that seemed to squirm on its own. Could you help me shatter this beyonder characteristic of the Attendant of Mysteries? That's simple enough. The Earth Mother accepted it delicately between her fingers. With the faintest motion, a soft crack, a distorted light shimmered, and the dark vortex instantly broke apart into a dozen fragments, scattering across the ground like shards of glass. To an ordinary beyonder, destroying an beyonder characteristic was unthinkable. But to a Sequence Zero god, it was as effortless as crushing a piece of tofu. Edward exhaled with relief, gathering the scattered fragments one by one before picking up the remaining core of the Attendant of Mysteries beyonder characteristic. He extended it toward her with both hands. Your Grace, I don't have much to offer as thanks, so, please accept this. The Earth Mother's calm voice carried no fluctuation. It's of no use to me. Edward smiled faintly. Then consider it an investment, for the future Lord of Mysteries. For a brief moment, silence lingered between them. The Earth Mother's tranquil gaze rested upon him, unreadable. Finally, she said quietly, I have no need to invest in the future Lord of Mysteries. The difficulties I face cannot be solved merely by his appearance. Edward gave a dry laugh. Fair enough. Still, thank you. If I manage to survive long enough to find Lilith, I'll bring her to visit you. Her lips curved into a gentle, motherly smile. You'll both be welcome, anytime. Edward nodded faintly. Then, I'll be going. He didn't dare linger. With a flicker of motion, he vanished, using wandering to slip back into the real world. He reappeared on a desolate island deep within the fog sea. The instant his feet touched the black sand, he drew a deep, stabilizing breath. Then he took out a cauldron and a series of items. The Worm of Spirit, Worm of Star, and Worm of Time. The beyonder characteristic of the Planeswalker. And the recently obtained beyonder characteristic of the Miracle Invoker. Everything was ready. He was just about to drop the Planeswalker characteristic into the cauldron when a thought struck him. He reached into his spatial pocket and pulled out a folded paper crane and a pen. On it, he scrawled a single line. A little extra luck, please. After folding the paper and tucking it into his coat, he picked up the beyonder characteristic that gleamed like a burning crystal ember, the Miracle Invokers, and tossed it into the cauldron. Then, one by one, he added the 3 worms from the Coward family. The moment they came into contact, the materials began to melt rapidly, blending together into a swirl of grayish-white vapors that spiraled upward before condensing into a deep blue, starlit liquid, semi-transparent and quietly glowing. Edward stared at it for a moment, and at once, he felt himself being drawn in. It was as if he had stepped into the vast cosmos he'd glimpsed during every past advancement. Stars flickered across the infinite void, scattered like jewels upon black velvet. An overwhelming sense of smallness, confusion, and despair welled up within him, an illusion that the universe itself would swallow him whole in the next breath. Then, pain. A sharp, stabbing pain in his spirituality jolted him awake. Not because it consciously warned him, but as a symptom of his weakening life force. The loss of vitality had reached his spirituality, it was starting to hurt. Edward bit his tongue hard, the metallic taste of blood grounding him back to awareness. By now, the liquid in the cauldron had stopped bubbling. It was condensing slowly, its color deepening, its starlight growing even brighter, like countless constellations compressed into a single vessel. Edward flipped a gold coin for a brief divination, then nodded to himself. The timing was right. He took out the translucent, heart-shaped beyonder characteristic of the Miracle Invoker and dropped it into the cauldron. The moment it touched the dark liquid, it melted seamlessly into it. The mixture thickened and darkened, becoming an unfathomable abyss. From within, countless eyes seemed to flicker open, each one lit by starlight, all staring silently from the depths. Then, the liquid went still. Edward blinked, his mind briefly slipping into an odd daze. Children often say that stars blink. He chuckled weakly to himself. Well, now I've truly seen what blinking stars look like. With a wave of his hand, Edward lifted the shimmering liquid from the cauldron, letting it float before him in midair. His eyes flickered for a few seconds, then steadied. He drew in a deep breath and inhaled the potion. The moment the liquid slid down his throat, it split apart into countless cold, wriggling worms. They spread rapidly through his body, infiltrating every nerve, every vein, every cell. Then, boom. Edward's mind shattered into 1,000 fragments, no, not just his mind. His body too, disintegrated in an instant, breaking apart into innumerable motes of starlight. Each glimmering particle was immediately drawn upward by the vault of the heavens above, yearning desperately to leave the earth and soar into the starry sea. But before they could escape, threads of gray-black smoke began seeping from each fragment. These filaments connected the scattered worms of stars like strings of a web, intertwining and merging until they formed a shimmering humanoid silhouette, pulsing faintly with starlight. Within every worms of star, scenes and fragments surfaced, pieces of deconstruction. The unraveling of Intis's true nature. The unraveling of the mystery behind Lilith's resurrection. The unraveling of the decayed wooden door forged by Mr. Door and the mother goddess of depravity. And the unraveling of that person spoken of by the true creator. Each revelation collided and merged, building upon one another, assembling piece by piece until they formed a single, complete truth. And at that very moment, Edward suddenly realized, his previous understanding of the deconstruction scholar had been wrong. He had always thought that deconstruction meant uncovering the truth behind events. But in truth, a deconstruction scholar did not analyze truths, they analyzed the essence of things. Just as a human being is not merely composed of water and carbon, but of cells, molecules, and atoms, those are the true essence. Then, Edward thought, eyes widening in revelation, why was I still able to fully digest the potion despite misunderstanding its core? The thought turned over in his mind, then, a bold hypothesis emerged. Perhaps, it all traced back to the oldest one. In modern science, the essence of matter lies in molecules, atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, but in the mystical world, the essence of all things was the oldest one itself. Everything was born from the fragmentation of the oldest one. And everything was converging once more, for the revival of the oldest one. Intis's conspiracy tied directly to Cheek's ambition to become the oldest one. Lilith's entry into the mirror world was likely linked to the same force. The true creators, that person, carried a piece of the awakened oldest one within him, and everything they did was part of resisting its resurgence. So I accidentally struck the right chord, Edward murmured in realization. That's why the potion worked perfectly, pure coincidence. But another thought followed, chilling and grim. If, during this time, the things I deconstructed hadn't been tied to the oldest one, would I have lost control entirely? The starlit silhouette before him gradually condensed, reforming into Edward's original shape. His mind and spirit snapped back into alignment with his body, but the instant he returned to himself, he sensed something terribly wrong. Two conflicting forces surged through him. The first came from the newly obtained power of Sequence 2. It filled him with vitality, an overwhelming surge of divinity and transcendence. But along with it came a dangerous detachment, arrogance, apathy, coldness, cruelty, and the creeping madness of godhood, all flooding into his spirit, trying to assimilate him, reshape him into something no longer human. The second was the continual loss of life force brought by Madman to the right. His body and soul were withering, frail and pained, tugging him violently back down into human weakness. It whispered mockingly, "You're dying, what's the point of pretending to be above it all?" And so, to compensate for the dying weakness of his body, the divine power of Sequence 2 instinctively poured strength back into him, life and spirituality intertwining, trying to maintain equilibrium. That tension, paradoxically, stabilized him. His fading humanity rekindled. His mind cleared. Edward finally recalled a crucial truth. If Sequences 4 and 3 demigods were still within the realm of human, then Sequence 2 had already left humanity behind entirely. In the modern age, it was called angel, but in the ancient times, angel meant a subsidiary god. Thus, ascending to Sequence 2 required a firm anchor, something to hold one's humanity in place. Without an anchor, an angel would lose their sense of self, at best becoming emotionless, at worst descending into irreversible madness. In the original history, Klein relied on the members of the Tarot Club, on the prayers of the sea gods believers in the Rorstad Islands, to anchor his humanity swiftly. But Edward had no one. He had walked his path almost entirely alone. Who could he rely on now to help him stay human? Even if he chose to kill himself again and revive through Bernadette's memories, that would only delay the inevitable. Without an anchor, time itself would erode his humanity away. Hey, I suppose the backlash from Madman to the right turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Edward laughed softly, a wry, self-deprecating sound. And indeed, it was self-mockery. His life force was still draining, though at a slower pace. He had merely bought himself a bit more time before the inevitable. So now I'm neither dead nor alive, he muttered bitterly. Just as his state began to stabilize, a sudden burning pain seared across the back of his hand. He glanced down. There, glowing faintly against his skin, was a square sigil outlined like a door, its lines pulsing with dim light. He couldn't discern its meaning. He ran his fingers lightly over the mark, feeling nothing but warmth. But one thing was certain. He had officially ascended to Sequence 2. He was now an angel. Yet unlike his past advancements, his consciousness did not soar into the starry void, nor did he need to open that symbolic door. Instead, when he lifted his gaze, his sight pierced the heavens themselves, seeing the boundless cosmos, brilliant and cold. And in the next instant, radiant starlight flickered across his vision. An endless flood of information poured into his mind. Sequence 2, Fantasist. What the heart conceives, becomes real. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 621, Entering the Mirror World. Edward's consciousness continued to absorb the streams of information flooding in from the stars. Abilities of the Sequence 2, Fantasist. Door, transforms oneself into a symbolic form, allowing instant travel between different planets and worlds. Can temporarily create avatars using worms of star, enabling simultaneous presence in multiple locations. Summary compiled from existing data. Replication, not only records supernatural abilities but also records scenes and individuals. Enables direct transfer of oneself and nearby beings into the recorded scene, or brings that scene to manifest around a target area, as long as it still exists. Can also reproduce recorded individuals and their abilities. Fantasy, by collecting imagination, wishes, or consuming one's own spirituality, one gains the power to make fantasy real. Advancing to Sequence 2 granted Edward 2.5 new abilities. The half was replication, an enhancement of the recording power he possessed since his time as a scribe. The second was door, which not only granted Edward vastly superior mobility, but, like the other two of the cowardly trio families, allowed him to create copies of himself. Though his avatars couldn't compare to the Marauders' clones, or even the Seer's marionettes, they had one overwhelming advantage. By combining them with multiple recorded abilities, Edward could unleash carpet-style, simultaneous attacks across wide areas. And finally, fantasy, the true core ability of Sequence 2. Its rules resembled the miracle invoker's. Miracle, one must first gather the imagination, or wishes, of others, then channel them into one's own spirituality to manifest fantasy as reality. Of course, spirituality itself could serve as the fuel for fantasies, but relying solely on his own essence severely limited what he could realize. His fantasies would be small, temporary, and unstable, merely an emergency power source. Beyond that, all of his existing powers had been strengthened through the advancement, especially theft. At the Sequence 2 level, its nature had transformed fundamentally, its range now extended to encompass fate, identity, self-perception, and even beyond her characteristics. It had become truly terrifying. Yet, Edward's mind wasn't focused on power. What concerned him most was the enhancement to deconstruction. This new, refined form allowed him to analyze and dismantle the essence of a target far more quickly and efficiently, and that was the real reason he had been so desperate to advance to Sequence 2. Unfortunately, his hope that this promotion would stop the life-draining side effect of madman to the right had not panned out. The result was disappointing. At best, he had bought himself an extra 3 days, no more. If the time it takes to deconstruct exceeds the time I have left to live, he muttered, I might have to test fantasy instead. Having made up his mind, Edward turned his focus to the remaining stream of information, the next stage of the pathway. Sequence 1, Constructor. Ingredients, Key of Stars Potion plus Author's Beyonder Characteristic. Advancement Ritual, Construct a real and complete world. Edward froze. Construct a real and complete world. He immediately thought of the ritual required for a miracle invoker to advance to Attendant of Mysteries. To establish a town composed entirely of marionettes, each with an individual destiny and storyline, interacting with one another to form a sufficiently realistic depiction of life, thus creating a corresponding area in the spirit world. But the more concise the ritual description, the greater its weight. The Attendant of Mysteries ritual only required building a puppet town. The more vivid and authentic it was, the stronger the effect, but it was still, at its core, a town. Edward's ritual, however, was simply defined as construct a real and complete world. Such wording had no upper limit. Taken in a minimal sense, he could follow the model of the Attendant of Mysteries marionette town, combining his abilities, record, false reality, transfiguration spells, and fantasy to create something self-contained. But in the maximal sense, there were no boundaries. The phrase could mean literally constructing an entire world, down to every layer of existence. Edward's gaze drifted toward the listed ingredient, the author's Beyonder characteristic. At once, his mind flashed to Grossel's travels, and to that writer's snowy town. Both were worlds in their own right, small or large, but real and complete in their own dimension. Both had been forged through the powers of the writer, perhaps even the visionary. But I don't have those abilities, Edward murmured, frowning. Am I supposed to rely entirely on fantasy? He rubbed his temples. What, am I expected to spend decades or centuries gathering enough imagination to build a world in one go? He sighed deeply. Another massive, uncertain project that'll take half an eternity. And then his gaze fell back on the words author's Beyonder characteristic. A sharp pang of realization struck him. So, this ritual basically forces me into direct conflict with the Russian priest, doesn't it? Anyone who stood in the way of that golden-eyed priest's ascension to Sequence 0 would inevitably become his mortal enemy. But then Edward paused, his expression shifting slightly as a new thought came to him. Wait, in the future timeline, the priest merges early with the true creator, doesn't he? If that's the case, maybe he no longer needs all three authors' characteristics. He let out a dry chuckle, somewhere between amusement and resignation. Well, that's something, at least. That being the case, perhaps there was still a chance. Forget it, Edward muttered. No point worrying about things that distant. For now, I need to focus on getting into the mirror world and finding Lilith. With that thought, he took a step forward. The world around him rippled like water, clouds twisting and sky bending. In the blink of an eye, he stood before a massive transparent barrier that stretched endlessly from heaven to earth, the boundary of the mirror world. Ever since his ascension as a planeswalker, Edward had gained the ability to enter and exit the mirror world freely. Standing before that immense, glass-like wall, he activated deconstruction. His vision sharpened, piercing through the mirror, revealing the intricate essence and authority woven into its structure. As his analysis deepened, his spiritual perception calculated the estimated time to complete the full deconstruction, 2 to 3 weeks. That was both unexpected and reasonable. After all, this barrier was born from the authority of the primordial demoness, and such power could hardly be easily undone. The last time he'd attempted to deconstruct the darkness authority, the feedback had been staggering. It would have taken over 1,000 years. Even now, as a sequence 2, it might still take centuries. For this mirror barrier, only 2 or 3 weeks were required. That meant the portion of authority infused here was relatively limited. But 2 or 3 weeks was still far too long. Not just because of his worry for Lilith, but because his own life could barely last a few days. Edward raised his hand, pressing his palm against the smooth, invisible surface. Closing his eyes, he expanded his thoughts and invoked fantasy. In the next second, he felt his spirituality surge out of him, drawn rapidly into the mirror. A chill spread through his palm, followed by the sensation of liquid flowing around his hand. Cold mist brushed across his face. Opening his eyes, he saw that a man-sized hollow had appeared in the barrier before him, and within it flowed clear, rippling water. His palm, once pressed against the glass, was now submerged within it. Without hesitation, Edward stepped forward. The instant he crossed the threshold, his entire body was enveloped by the icy embrace of water. His vision blurred, sound dissolved into silence. But the sensation of submersion lasted only a few seconds. Then the world opened up again. He found himself standing in a familiar room, number 15 Emerald Street, on the other side of the barrier. Glancing back, he saw the same seamless, crystalline wall behind him. The hole his fantasy had carved through reality was gone, as though it had never existed. I made it inside. Edward flicked a coin, performing a quick divination. The results confirmed it, he was indeed within the mirror world. He immediately phased through the wall, emerging into the street outside the villa. Everything looked the same as in the real world, the houses, the street, the trees, yet the entire environment was cloaked in an oppressive, absolute silence. There was no wind. No rustle of leaves. No trace of life. Lilith, where are you? Edward took out his wand, performing a dowsing rod divination. The wand spun erratically at first, then pointed firmly toward a direction, the end of the street. He followed it without hesitation. But after walking barely a dozen meters, the surroundings began to distort. Walls warped like melting wax, the air shimmered, some objects turned translucent, others simply vanished. The moment he stopped moving, everything froze, returning to stillness. Edward frowned, scanning the area carefully. He saw nothing, but the throbbing pain of his decaying spirituality urged him forward again. So he walked on. Once more, the world shifted around him. When he reached the end of the street, the scenery abruptly transformed, and before him stood a familiar sight, a small villa in the Empress Borough of Backlund. But the changes didn't stop there. With every step forward, the illusion evolved, the Empress Borough melted into Minsk Street, the place where he had once rented his first apartment. Spires then rose in the distance, multiplying into towers that reached into the clouds. Until he stood before the soaring castle of Hogwarts. Edward froze for a moment. From Trier to Backlund made sense, the mirror world was, after all, a reflection of reality, as Chris Mona had once explained. But Hogwarts? That was another world altogether. Could it be, because of Lilith, he whispered. Is that why the mirror world is reflecting her domain? Then, she must be inside the castle. He broke into a run. But before he could reach the gates, the world twisted again. The castle's ancient stones liquefied into bricks and streets, Diagon Alley, the Ministry of Magic, corridors folding and collapsing. Until suddenly, the entire scene flattened out into a barren plain. A moment later, buildings erupted from the earth, rising in sequence, glass towers, neon signs, city lights. In the blink of an eye, he was standing in a sprawling modern metropolis. A blinding flash of white light shot toward him, searing his eyes. The roar of engines, honking of horns, hurried footsteps, voices, shouts, a flood of urban noise overwhelmed him. Thump. 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 The moment his sight cleared, something dark hurtled toward him. Instinctively, Edward raised his arms and caught it. He looked down. A basketball. For a second, he just stared blankly. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of bouncing balls filled the air, growing louder. Lifting his head, he found himself on an outdoor basketball court, surrounded by young men in their 20s, each playing in their own half of the court. Most wore casual shorts and t-shirts, a few had on jerseys. And he was one of them. Edward froze, utterly dumbfounded. There are living people in the mirror world. But, where the hell did it drop me this time? Note, 590 power stones for another extra chapter tomorrow. Go, vote. Chapter 622, Lilith. Hey. What are you spacing out for? Pass the ball, Zhang-san. A tall boy, easily over 1.9 meters, came sprinting toward the hoop, waving his arms and shouting. Zhang-san. Edward's mind went blank for a moment. I'm Zhang-san. A second-year engineering student at XX University. It's 4 in the afternoon, and I'm playing basketball with my classmates. Fragments of memory, unfamiliar yet vividly detailed, flooded into his mind, clashing with his own. The new memories pushed and twisted against his real ones, trying to overwrite them, until he could no longer tell which was truth and which was illusion. Then, a sharp, stabbing pain pierced his temple. His spirituality reacted instinctively, lashing out to protect his consciousness. Edward gasped and snapped back to himself, his expression darkening. What the hell is this nonsense, he muttered under his breath. If you're going to fabricate an identity for me, at least give me a proper name. Zhang-san. That's the definition of a random-ass, generic name. Pass the ball. The tall boy shouted again. 2 defenders rushed in, one moving to intercept the pass, the other stretching out to steal. Edward sighed softly. It's been ages since I last touched a basketball. I know this is all fake, but for some reason. A faint grin crept across his face. The thought of using beyonder abilities to show off on the court feels really tempting. He clutched the ball, bent his knees, and leapt, throwing the basketball with a sharp, fluid motion. Go in. For that brief moment, he felt like Kobe Bryant incarnate, the stadium lights bright, all eyes on him, and destiny balanced on his fingertips. Whoosh. The ball sailed through the air, and missed the backboard completely, sailing clean over the fence and out of the court. Edward stared wordlessly at the trajectory. Welp. I'm out. Damn it, Zhang-san. What was that? The tall boy groaned, hands on his hips. That was a perfect opportunity. You didn't even pass. You know the rules, loser buys everyone drinks later. He squinted. Also, dude, why did you suddenly throw that hard? What are you, on something? Accident. Total accident. Edward reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled bill, handing it over. Here. Drinks on me. Huh. Anyway, I've got something to take care of. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back. Oh, by the way, have you ever heard of a girl named Lilith? The tall boy frowned. Lilith. Sounds foreign. You should ask the exchange students, I don't really know them. Before Edward could reply, one of the other players, the one who'd tried to steal the ball, laughed. Lilith. Of course I've heard of Lilith. You mean the game company in Shanghai, right? I play AFK Arena and Soul Hunters, both theirs. Edward blinked, caught off guard. So this entire place is built from my own memories. But it was a warped, scrambled version of them. The school wasn't his real university. His name wasn't his real name. Everything was slightly off. He left the basketball court quickly, picking up a stray stick along the path and performing another dowsing ritual. Lilith, are you here? This time, the stick quivered and pointed straight ahead, hovering in place as though locked onto something. Edward followed immediately, striding down the quiet path. Soon, he had left the campus-like area behind and arrived at the edge of a tranquil lake, lined with swaying willow trees. As he drew closer to the water, a reflection caught his eye, his reflection. He froze. The face staring back at him was his own from before crossing worlds, the face of his younger self. The season felt like the transition between spring and summer, warm sunlight, soft breeze, the air carrying a faint fragrance of grass and water. Couples strolled hand in hand along the lakeside, their laughter mingling with the rustling of willow leaves. Feels just like my college days, Edward murmured. A wry smile touched his lips. Though I wasn't as lucky as these kids. For years single, every night either grinding Genshin, parachuting into Pochinki, or smashing controllers in Smash Brothers. He sighed nostalgically. Yeah. Wasted youth, but damn, it was fun. His thoughts drifted, until something caught his attention. Up ahead, near the edge of the lake, lay a patch of black in the grass. Edward's heart skipped a beat. He broke into a run. As he approached, the shape came into focus, a small black cat, fur sleek and glossy, belly up to the sun, tiny paws twitching as it basked lazily. Its golden eyes were half closed to thin slits, the very picture of indolent bliss. Edward froze mid-step. Lilith. He shouted the name aloud, the sound echoing across the still waters. The black cat's ears twitched. It cracked open one eye, giving him a languid, half-hearted glance. Then promptly closed it again, curling its tail and continuing its nap. Lilith. Edward took another cautious step forward, voice lowering, half exasperated, half relieved. Edward crouched down in front of the little black cat, his voice soft but trembling slightly with emotion as he reached out. Lilith, it's me. Edward. But the instant his fingertips were about to touch her fur, the cat's body tensed with a sudden jolt. She leapt backwards, landing gracefully on all fours, her sleek back arching into a defensive curve as she hissed lazily but warily. Marrow. Asterisk. Edward froze mid-motion. Lilith, what's wrong? Don't you remember me? Then, realization struck him like lightning. Back when he first entered this strange world, it had tried to rewrite his identity, implanting false memories of being Zhang San. Could it be that the same had happened to Lilith? That her memories had been altered, and she'd reverted to her cat form? If so, that would explain why she was trapped here, unable to leave. Without hesitation, Edward flipped a coin into the air. It spun once, landed on its head, affirmative. So you really are Lilith? He exhaled softly and tried to calm his tone. Don't be afraid, Lilith. He extended his hand again, inch by inch, toward her small head. Sensing no hostility, the cat didn't bolt this time. Instead, she sniffed suspiciously at his fingers, her tiny pink nose twitching as she hesitated, drawing closer. Good girl, come on, Lilith. Let's go home. Chomp. Without warning, the cat bit down on his finger, hard. As Edward lifted his hand in reflex, the small black creature dangled from it like a furry pancake, paws dangling helplessly. A bitter smile crossed Edward's face. Well, this feels familiar. He couldn't help but remember their very first meeting, when he'd been an ordinary human, and Lilith had sunk her teeth into his hand the exact same way. Grabbing her gently by the scruff of her neck, he lifted her up. The little cat immediately began to protest, meowing in outrage and flailing her paws in indignation. All right, I get it. You're angry. But calm down first. Once we leave this place, you'll understand everything. Marrow. Really, it's fine. Trust me. Marrow. Omega. Seeing that she was struggling more violently, Edward sighed and tapped her lightly between the shoulders, casting a minor force dispersal charm. Her body instantly went limp, tail drooping as she hung there powerless in his grasp. Hey! A furious shout cut through the calm air. Edward turned to see a blonde girl standing a few meters away. One hand held up a smartphone, recording him, the other clutched a rock, as she shouted in fairly fluent Mandarin, I'm warning you. Put that cat down right now, or I'll post this video online and expose you for animal abuse. Edward blinked, utterly speechless for a moment. Then, carefully cradling the now limp black cat in his arms, he tried to explain. You misunderstand. I'm not abusing her. She's my cat, I'm just taking her home. Nonsense, the blonde snapped. We've been taking care of this cat for months, our dorm adopted her. We call her Lil Blackie. How is she yours? Edward stopped himself. What am I even doing? Explaining to a bunch of illusions. He sighed inwardly. Forget it. He'd just leave. He turned to step away, but before he could, hurried footsteps sounded behind him. Two Chinese girls came running up. One also had her phone raised, recording him, while the other called out in alarm. I'm on ICs. What's going on? Did that guy hurt you? I was taking Lil Blackie to visit Lily, the blonde stammered angrily, pointing at Edward, and then he tried to take her away. He even hurt her. What? The girl holding the phone rounded on Edward, glaring. Put the cat down. Everyone's watching, you'd better run now before someone calls the police. But Edward's focus wasn't on their words anymore. His gaze had locked on the blonde girl. I'm on ICs, he repeated slowly. The name hit him like thunder. Perhaps in any ordinary world, the name Amon Isis wouldn't mean much. But in the world of mysteries, it was anything but ordinary. It was the true name of the Evernight goddess. What's wrong? The blonde stammered, shrinking back under the weight of his stare. The two Chinese girls immediately stepped in front of her protectively, raising their voices in anger. You hurt her and now you want to fight? Help! Someone call the police. Edward snapped his fingers. Both girls went silent, their mouths literally vanishing from their faces. He looked back at the trembling blonde and murmured, almost to himself, "This is the eight-legged demonic wolf." Her eyes went wide with horror. If animal abuse had made him a bad guy before, then this, snapping his fingers to erase mouths from existence, made him something else entirely. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Edward's expression softened slightly. He met her green eyes, and invoked legitimacy, the reading of thoughts. Amon Isis, exchange student, from Western Europe. Came here during her freshman year. Shares a dorm with 3 Chinese girls. He finished reading quickly. There was nothing divine in her memories, nothing connected to the Evernight goddess. So, just a coincidence. But then again, in the mysteries world, coincidences were rarely coincidences. A realization struck him. The Evernight goddess is currently in slumber. Could this girl's appearance be connected somehow? He looked down at the black cat in his arms, murmuring softly, "Lilith, what in the world is happening?" "Why you?" Edward looked up. The blonde girl had regained her voice, trembling but trying to be brave. "Are you a magician? Or?" Her 2 friends flinched at her question, but she took a hesitant step forward. She'd clearly decided that whatever he was, he didn't mean harm. Edward arched an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" "Because." She clutched her phone nervously. "If you really are one, could you help us save someone?" "Oh." Edward's tone lightened a little. "A side quest." He chuckled under his breath. "All right. I can try." "Thank you," the girl said hurriedly. "It's my friend, Lily. She was in a car accident not long ago and suffered a head injury. She's been in a coma for weeks, no sign of waking. Please, can you help her?" Edward's brows furrowed. Lily. He remembered the name immediately, from Amonise's memories. One of her 3 roommates. Her real name was Lily, and when choosing an English name, she had lazily picked the common and easy-to-pronounce Lily. A thought formed, sharp and uneasy. Lily, and Lilith. He looked down again at the small black cat nestled weakly in his arms. Could there be a connection? Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 623, Chapter 623, The Dark Lord. Edward flipped another coin, and once again, it landed heads up. The result remained affirmative. "So, Lily really is connected to Lilith," he murmured. "But then, what's with this black cat? Could their connection be nothing more than the fact that this girl had been feeding and taking care of Lilith all along? Either way, there was only one way to find out. We're going to the hospital." "Huh." Before any of the 3 girls could react, Edward waved his hand. And in the next instant, the scenery around them warped and folded inward. A ripple spread across space like a mirror breaking in slow motion. When their vision cleared, they were already standing inside a hospital corridor, directly in front of the ward belonging to the comatose girl named Lily. The 3 girls gaped in open shock. If erasing mouths had been an unbelievable trick, then this, instantaneous teleportation, was beyond comprehension. It was power on a level that transcended reality. "You can speak again." Edward snapped his fingers, lifting the silent spell. The 2 Chinese girls immediately gasped, hands flying to their mouths in delight and relief, as though confirming they were still there. Then, nervously, they both glanced at Edward from the corners of their eyes, neither daring to utter a single word. "Go in." The 3 exchanged uneasy looks, then slowly pushed open the door. Edward followed behind them, cradling the black cat in his arms. Inside was a private room. A young woman, around 20 years old, lay motionless on the hospital bed, her eyes closed, her face pale as paper. The steady rhythm of the monitor beat beside her, fragile yet persistent. Her features were soft, delicate, like those of a quiet, well-bred young lady. Beautiful, yes, but she was clearly not the grown version of the Lilith Edward knew. Edward performed another divination. The coin spun, flipped, and landed heads up again. "She's Lilith too." He frowned. 2 Liliths. At the bedside, Amon Isis gently clasped the sleeping girl's hand. "Lily, we came to see you," she whispered softly. "Can you hear me? Look, I even brought your favorite, Lil Blackie." She turned back to Edward with pleading eyes. Edward sighed, handing her the small black cat and lifting the charm suppressing it. Immediately, the creature came back to life, wiggling, twisting, and wriggling free of her arms before leaping lightly onto the bed's headboard. The cat hissed softly at Edward, back arched in defiance. But as she turned her head toward Lily, something in her changed. Her nose twitched. She froze, hesitant, then cautiously patted closer. Gently, she pressed her paw against the girl's cheek, rubbing twice. Then, with a soft, trembling marrow, she lowered her head and began to nuzzle Lily's face tenderly. The room fell silent. "Mr. Magician." One of the girls whispered timidly. "Can you wake her up?" Edward hesitated. Though he had already ascended to Sequence 2, his abilities were primarily metaphysical, geared toward deconstruction, manipulation, and extraordinary phenomena. He had no real power for healing, certainly not for reviving a comatose human. Maybe, he murmured, if I tried deconstruction. He focused his gaze on the unconscious girl. His vision pierced through her flesh, through the outer layers of tissue and bone, until he reached the most fundamental layer of her being. Not cells. Not blood or soul. But strands of energy, faint, elusive, and intertwined like threads of light. Edward's breath caught. This is memory. It wasn't merely her mind, her entire existence seemed to be structured from memory. Yet these memories were dark, blank, like a row of turned-off television screens. They were present, but lifeless. So if I restore them, he thought, if I reactivate her memories, will she awaken? As the thought formed, something responded. The black screens, one by one, began to flicker, then light up. They played like film reels spinning at rapid speed, images of her birth, childhood, growing up, school, friends, everything she had experienced over 21 years, until the moment before the car accident. Then, darkness again. Edward frowned. That's odd. She fell into a coma after the accident, so her memories should have stopped there. But he could sense there were more memories beyond that point, long, tangled threads extending further, but they remained unlit, inert. Wait. A realization struck him like cold water. If this Lily is truly Lilith, then maybe all those earlier memories, everything before the crash, were artificial, implanted. And the real memories, the unlit ones, are still sealed away. If I awaken those, maybe she'll return to herself. He reached inward, willing the darkness to stir. Suddenly, a light flared. The first unlit memory after the car crash blinked open. From within it, a pair of eyes opened, cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of emotion. They glowed in the blackness, turning to meet Edward's gaze, as if aware of his presence. Then, boom. Edward's consciousness exploded like shattered glass. He was ripped violently out of deconstruction. Pain tore through him as the worms of star inside his body writhed uncontrollably, slamming against the confines of his flesh in blind panic, each one trying to escape. His entire being trembled on the brink of collapse. Fortunately, the sensation of collapse came as quickly as it went. Edward gasped for breath, forcing himself to focus, sending wave after wave of calm through his mind until the rampaging worms of star within him quieted down. Only then did he lift his eyes, alert, tense, toward the hospital bed. The girl's eyes were open. Hiss. At the exact same moment, the black cat let out a sharp hiss and leapt backwards from the bed. Its fur stood completely on end as it crouched low, growling with a frightened, guttural WRRR. Lily. Lily. You're awake. The three girls rushed toward the bedside, their faces shining with joy. You're okay. Can you hear us? How do you feel? Lily blinked in confusion, her gaze sweeping across the familiar faces in front of her. What's going on? Her voice was hoarse, her tone uncertain. The three girls began speaking all at once, each explaining what had happened, how she'd been in a coma after the accident, and how a magician had miraculously saved her. A magician? Lily's confusion only deepened. What kind of nonsense is this? I fall asleep and wake up to find magicians and miracles in hospitals now. That's not even remotely scientific. She tilted her head slightly to the side, peering past her roommates, and saw Edward standing quietly near the wall, the black cat cradled in his arms. Even though part of her thought this had to be some sort of prank, she hesitated a few seconds before whispering. Thank you, Mr. Magician. Just then, her head jerked slightly, and she gasped. A sharp pain lanced through her skull, and her vision warped, the edges of the world doubled and blurred, as if two realities were overlapping. Fragments of someone else's memories burst into her mind. Edward. The name slipped out of her mouth before she could stop it. Edward's eyes widened. He stepped forward immediately. Lilith. You remember me? No. Lily shook her head, bewildered. Who's Lilith? My name's Lily. But, why do I know your name? Edward. I've never met you before, yet I know you. Her brows furrowed as pain struck again. She clutched her head, her voice breaking. Why are my memories so mixed up? It hurts so much. What's happening to me? And then, the warmth drained from the room. One of the girls, who had just moments ago been smiling, spoke suddenly, her tone flat and cold. There has never been a Lilith. There is only Lily. Everything about Lilith is false. Another girl turned toward them, her eyes empty. Accept it. Admit it. You are me, and I am you. Lilith is nothing but a fantasy you created. Lilith, you are false. The door creaked open. A nurse stepped in, expression blank, eyes devoid of light. There was never a Lilith. Only Lily. You are not real. Then came a doctor, his voice mechanical, fake. All of it is fake. More people followed, faces Edward didn't recognize, patients, staff, strangers. Each one repeating the same words, overlapping in a nightmarish chorus. Your memories are illusions. You can't escape reality. False. Everything you are is false. Give up. Stop resisting. False. 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 Their monotone voices grew louder and louder, filling the room like a maddening echo chamber. Edward immediately grabbed Lily with one arm, scooped up the trembling black cat with the other, and motioned for the terrified Amnesis to move. We're leaving. He tried to teleport, but nothing happened. Not just teleportation, he realized with a sinking feeling that all of his beyonder powers had vanished. His spirituality was gone, empty. Like someone had erased it from existence. No. Damn it. That's right, came Lily's voice, but it was no longer her gentle, human tone. It was cold, unfeeling, and soaked in malice. Lilith is false. Only Lily is real. A terrifying aura erupted from within her body, spilling outward like a shockwave. The walls groaned, twisting and warping as if reality itself were bending under the weight of her presence. Marrow. The black cat shrieked and scrambled up Edward's shoulder, clinging to him, trembling violently. Get out. Lily's face distorted into something monstrous, her voice rising to an inhuman pitch. Get out of my memory. From her body surged a blackness so deep it devoured light. The darkness spread in all directions, swallowing everything it touched, the walls, the floor, the people, the hospital itself. Edward turned, shielding the cat, and charged through the crowd. His body, superhuman even without powers, shoved aside the warped, howling figures, but the darkness was faster. Within seconds, the corridor behind him collapsed into pure void. No. He sprinted down the hall, trying to use every spell, every trick, but nothing worked. All his powers were gone. Marrow. Oh. The black cat's desperate cry echoed in his ears just before the darkness swallowed them whole. Thick. Cold. Silent. Hopeless. His 5 senses disintegrated. His mind dissolved into stillness. It was the same suffocating void he'd felt the moment before his last death. So, I died again. The thought barely formed before something seized his right hand, hard. A sudden pull. Then his entire body was yanked violently upward, out of the darkness, out of the suffocating stillness. The world shifted. The black faded. Light returned, faint but growing. Edward gasped as color bled back into the world around him, an alleyway, dimly lit, narrow, reeking faintly of smoke and rain. He was running, no, being dragged, by someone clutching his hand tightly. Where am I? What just happened? Who's pulling me? Footsteps echoed, breath ragged. The girl ahead of him turned her head slightly, golden hair whipping behind her. Her lips moved rapidly, shouting something, but the words came distorted, muffled, as though echoing from underwater. What? I can't hear you, where are we? What's going on? The sound warped, then sharpened. Stop asking questions, she shouted. If the Dark Lord's followers catch us, we're both dead. Edward froze mid-step. Dark Lord. He blinked, disoriented. Wait, you mean Voldemort? The blonde girl shot him a look of pure disbelief. Voldemort. He's been dead for years. The one ruling Europe's magical world now is. She took a sharp turn into another alley, voice echoing back to him. The Dark Lord Lily. Edward nearly tripped over his own feet. The Dark Lord, Lily. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 624, Chapter 624, The Cat, Double Length. Something felt wrong. Every instinct in Edward screamed at him that this world wasn't right, and yet, before he could analyze it, a torrent of fragmented memories crashed into his mind. According to those memories, he was a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. 3 years ago, Hogwarts' most brilliant student, Lily, had joined forces with Albus Dumbledore to finally destroy Voldemort. The wizarding world rejoiced, believing peace had come at last. Until the day Lily turned on Dumbledore. She'd ambushed and killed him, then swiftly rallied Voldemort's remaining Death Eaters, crowning herself as the new Dark Lord. The new Dark Lord wasted no time. She seized control of the Ministry of Magic, consolidated her forces, and within a year conquered France, Britain, and Germany, declaring herself Supreme Minister of European Magic. Then, she turned her armies against the united front of the 3 great wizarding schools. Last month, Hogwarts itself had fallen. The survivors scattered. The rebels hid. And he, Edward glanced at himself, no, Zhang San, one of the escapees, was supposedly among the core resistance against the Dark Lord Li. Zhang San again. Edward muttered in disbelief. What's with this name? That's the laziest alias I've ever seen. He froze. Wait, why did I say again? Something in his memory wavered. I'm on Ices, where are we going? That name, it tugged at something deep in his thoughts, a faint familiarity that sent a chill down his spine. The blonde girl ahead glanced back, wand in hand. We're going to meet up with the savior, Harry Potter. Edward blinked. But, why are we running? Why not just apparate? After all, as a supposed core member of the Resistance, he'd long since mastered the spell. Did you hit your head just now? Amon Icy snapped. This whole area's under anti-apparition wards. Oh. Right. Here. The girl stopped before a nondescript brick wall in a narrow alley. She tapped the wall rhythmically with her wand, once, twice, 3 times, nothing happened. What are you doing? Quiet. She pressed her hand against one of the bricks. And suddenly, the wall twisted like liquid glass. A spiraling pull seized them both, sucking them into the wall. After a dizzying rush of color and vertigo, the world righted itself. They stood in a large underground room, maybe several hundred square meters wide, dimly lit by floating magical lamps. The cracked brick walls were plastered with portraits from Hogwarts, the Fat Friar, nearly headless Nick, rows of past headmasters. Voices filled the air. Our mission this time is to destroy the Dark Lord Li's final Horcrux. Edward turned toward the voice. A young man of 18 or 19 stood at the center, messy-haired, glasses slightly crooked, eyes bright with determination. Harry Potter. He was addressing the gathered crowd with resolute passion, outlining strategy, giving orders. Cheers erupted from the rebels with every few sentences. The room burned with tense, desperate energy. Amon Ices. Zhang San. Here. The blonde girl immediately stepped forward. Edward hesitated, grimacing at how out of place his name sounded in such a fiery revolution scene, then reluctantly followed. Share with everyone what you've discovered about the Dark Lord's final Horcrux. Yes, sir. Amon Ices raised her voice so all could hear. The Dark Lord Li's last Horcrux is none other than the black cat that never leaves her side. She always keeps it close, under heavy protection. Killing that cat without confronting her directly is impossible. A murmur spread through the crowd. Harry nodded gravely, his voice ringing out with conviction. Then we'll form a strike team, a suicide squad, if necessary. Someone must create a distraction strong enough to give us a chance to destroy the Horcrux. The room fell silent, until a deep, calm voice cut through the air. I'll go. Everyone turned. A tall, black-robed man with a sallow face stepped forward, Severus Snape. No, Professor Snape, Harry protested, shaking his head. You still have. There will only be one chance, Snape said firmly. No one is more suited to this than I. He looked straight into Harry's green eyes. Potter, you are far stronger than your father ever was. The future is yours. Avada Kedavra. The sudden roar of a curse shattered the air. The bright green flash of death erupted from behind. Amon Icy stood with her wand raised, her face cold and emotionless. There was no time for anyone to react. The killing curse streaked across the room, aimed straight for Harry Potter. But before it could hit, a figure stepped into its path. Snape. The curse struck him square in the chest. His body went rigid, eyes widening, the light within them dimming fast. Potter. He rasped, the last of his strength fading. Live, on. He fell heavily to the floor, lifeless. For a moment, the room was frozen in shock. Then chaos erupted. Dozens of wands whipped up, every one pointed at Amon Ices and the utterly bewildered Edward standing beside her. Expelliarmus. Edward's wand flew from his hand before he could even blink. He stared down at his empty fingers, utterly lost. Wait, what the hell? Aren't I supposed to be part of the Resistance? Since when am I the villain? Amon Ices. Zhang San. Harry's grief-stricken face twisted with fury. Why? Why would you do this? Edward opened his mouth. Baba. Completely speechless. Amon Ices' expression was cold as stone. My parents are in the Dark Lord's hands, she said flatly. I have no choice. Her gaze swept across the room, hard and merciless. The Dark Lord's army has surrounded this base. If you value your lives, drop your wands and surrender. Smack. A sharp slap echoed through the hall. A girl with pale golden hair, dressed in odd, whimsical clothes, strode up and struck Amon Ices across the face. Traitor. Luna Lovegood spat, trembling with rage. Harry, she said, turning to him, we'll hold them off. You have to run. No, Luna, Harry murmured, shaking his head slowly. It's too late. Ha 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 ha. A dark, chilling laugh rolled through the chamber. The shadows behind the crowd twisted and parted, revealing a tall woman clad in flowing black robes, long hair spilling over her shoulders, a black cat perched upon them like a crown. Her eyes gleamed with wicked light. The Dark Lord Li. Behind her, her loyal enforcers stepped forth, radiating power. Excellent work, Amon Ices. Zhang-san, she purred. Welcome to our great wizarding family. Amnesis lowered her head in silence and walked obediently to stand behind her. Edward stood frozen between both sides, on one hand, the furious, desperate resistance. On the other, the victorious, menacing Dark Lord's army. He hesitated for half a second, then made his choice. He spun around and sprinted toward the Dark Lord's side, shouting loudly. Glorious Dark Lord. Zhang Sen pledges his loyalty to you. Everyone froze. The Dark Lord raised an eyebrow, amused. Then she turned back to Harry, her tone icy but oddly calm. Harry Potter, why must you fight me? I once thought you, of all people, would understand. Understand? Harry spat. How could I ever understand a murderer? If none of you resisted me, Lily snapped, I'd have no need to kill anyone. You want to shatter the boundaries between wizards and muggles, to rule both worlds. Harry's voice rose, trembling with fury. You're nothing but a tyrant. The Dark Lord's expression twisted with rage. I am doing this to save the wizarding world. Between muggles and wizards, the end is either one conquering the other, or the two becoming fully integrated until there's no distinction. And you lot, do you really think keeping us in two separate worlds will keep the peace? Muggle technology advances by the day, while wizarding magic grows weaker. The moment muggles choose to wage war on wizards will be the day the wizarding world is annihilated. If you seek peace through battle, peace endures. If you seek peace through compromise, peace dies. Are your brains truly so? Listening to the Dark Lord's words, Edward found them inexplicably persuasive. He couldn't help but nod along, again and again. The Dark Lord grew impatient. I'll say it one last time. Surrender and join us, and you live. Continue resisting, and you die. I am not that useless Voldemort, I won't give you. Avada Kedavra. A familiar voice. A familiar green. A familiar recipe. It was Amon Ices again. No one knew where she had produced another wand from, but this time, her target was the cat on the Dark Lord's shoulder. Crack. Puff. A neat, bleeding hole opened in Amon Ices' pale brow. She collapsed, eyes full of unwillingness. And you, Zhang-san, the Dark Lord turned and smiled pleasantly at Edward. Are you going to resist me as well? No. What kind of twisted game was this? Back and forth, again. I just finished steeling myself to defect decisively. And now you tell me I'm the Resistance's mole? What is even happening? I'm not like her. I truly, sincerely pledge my loyalty to the great Dark Lord, Edward said, spreading his arms as if for an execution. Really? If you don't believe me, use legitimacy on me. Lily's lips curved faintly. Oh. Then I shall. Edward's mind suddenly blurred. In his ears, a familiar incantation rang out, Avada Kedavra, in his own voice. When his thoughts snapped back into focus, the black cat on Lily's shoulder had already been struck by a beam of green light. Lily's smile vanished. As if racked by unbearable pain, her long black hair lifted without wind, her features twisting with feral rage. She raised both hands high. Blue-black flames swelled between her palms. Ah. Die, all of you. I was just now controlled by the Imperious curse. Edward tried to say. Boom. The blue-black fire expanded violently, coalescing into a colossal dragon of flame that slammed down upon the crowd. In the blink of an eye, everyone, including the Savior, turned to ash. Damn. So that's all the Savior's got. And people thought he could defeat the Dark Lord. The difference in power was absurd. I really was sincerely pledging loyalty to the Dark Lord. That was Edward's final thought before his consciousness went dark. He didn't know how much time passed. From murk and confusion, Edward's awareness slowly resurfaced. With the first ray of light, his vision cleared bit by bit. Before him stretched an opulent palace. He was seated at a long table. Around it sat more than a dozen people, men and women alike, their faces solemn as they discussed something of grave importance. The air was heavy, oppressive. At the head of the table sat a black-haired girl. She regarded everyone in silence, her expression unreadable. I disagree. The speaker was a red-haired man in black-red armor, arms folded, arrogance written across his face. I absolutely disagree. Disagree with what? A blue-haired man slammed the table. Medici. This is the Lord's decision. It's not up to your agreement. I don't care. You lot are definitely up to no good. Medici jabbed a finger toward the blonde girl beside Edward. And why is she allowed in a meeting of this level? The black-haired girl at the head spoke lightly. Amon Isis is personally designated by the Lord. Naturally, she has the right to participate. The blonde girl said, assassination, for the sake of redemption. Bullshit. Medici snorted, then turned to Edward. Zhang-san, you're the Lord's most trusted. You can't possibly agree to this nonsense plan, right? In an instant, all the memories returned to Edward. The Lord who created all things was experiencing the awakening of the primordial one within his own body. Thus, he had his deputy, Li, gather the most trusted kings of angels and subsidiary gods to form Rose Redemption, planning to assassinate the Lord, so that through resurrection, he could cast off the primordial one's revival. Edward himself had been chosen as one of the executors. Only Zhang-san, as a name, felt wildly out of place for the gravity of this gathering. Hadn't he thought something similar before? I also think it's unwise, Edward ventured, purely because he felt their odds of killing that Lord were abysmally low. You see. Even Zhang-san is against it. Li Li's gaze slid to him, cool and distant. This matter was decided from the beginning. If you're willing to help, stay. If not, I'll have to seal you temporarily and release you once it's done. Medici rose, eyes cold. You can try. Very well. Li nodded faintly. The Lord says, your request will be granted. The words had barely fallen when Medici's expression changed. Forced down by some immense pressure, he sat back. From his feet upward, stones spread rapidly. He tried to struggle, but his strength couldn't surface. You traitors, he roared at Li. Within a dozen seconds, he had become a solid statue. Zhang-san, what do you say? Edward lowered his gaze, schooling his expression. I will follow your arrangements. This assassination, though tacitly allowed by the Lord, must be as unexpected as possible, to avoid the primordial one's awakened consciousness lashing out at the moment of death. Li turned to Amon Isis. Therefore, Amnesis will keep you hidden throughout the process. The blonde girl nodded. Understood. Leodoro, Aucasus, you two will lead the first strike. Hera Bergen. One by one, Li assigned tasks. Finally, she looked to Edward. Zhang-san. Here. You will go and wake the Lord. All right. Edward answered promptly, then waited. When no further instructions came, he frowned. And then? There is no then. Your task is to wake the Lord. Fine. At least he wasn't being asked to fight to the death like the others. Go. Edward blinked, glancing around. Now. This was way too sudden. It felt like he dozed off and, still groggy, was being sent to assassinate the strongest deity in existence, like Kakuzu tasked with killing Hashirama. Who was Hashirama again? Amon Isis blinked at him. Don't worry. After you wake the Lord, I'll hide you immediately. Leave the rest to us. Sure, and what tier are you, compared to the Lord? Will your concealment actually work? Still, the duck had already been shoved onto the rack, there was no other choice. All right. I'm going. Edward took a single step and traversed space, arriving before a vast, majestic bronze gate. This was once the Giant King's court. After defeating the Giant King, the Lord had made it his divine kingdom. My lord. He had just lifted his hand to knock when the massive doors opened silently. A shaft of golden light spilt out from within, bathing him like warm sunlight. He walked slowly into the enormous palace, as though wading into a golden sea. The sights on either side shifted rapidly, like racing through a tunnel of time and space. When he came back to himself, he stood within a chamber fashioned entirely of gold. Upon a bed, once the Giant King's resting place, absurdly large even for titans. A small, black shape lay curled up, breathing in soft, steady snores. Edward took a few steps closer, and finally saw the Lord's true form. A black cat. The Lord who created all things, the omniscient and omnipotent God, was a cat. Wonderful. As perfunctory as naming me Zhang-san. Edward, of course, only dared to complain inwardly. According to the memories in his head, this black cat had led humanity to victory over nearly every ancient god, countless deities had been torn apart by her claws and fangs. Her roar alone could frighten 10,000 dragons to death, a single stamp of her paw could make the ancient gods quail. She was the mightiest, greatest of all divinities. My lord, are you awake? What is it? The black cat didn't open her eyes, the words sounded like murmurs in a dream. Li sent me to wake you. How long have I slept? Over 100 years. And the world outside? As you wished, humanity has overcome the wilderness and is slowly developing its own civilization. Yet they pray without cease, hoping to bask once more in your radiance. Her eyes opened, golden, like living flames. Sitting up lazily, she said calmly. No. Humanity does not need a god. I have fulfilled my duty. It is time to withdraw from the stage and hand the world back to them. Ah, then will you continue sleeping? Do you wish me to sleep, Zhang-san? Meeting those clear, spotless eyes, Edward felt a shock run through him. I think, you have labored too long. You really should rest more. Thank you. She stood, sprang lightly onto Edward's shoulder, and said, do what you must. Don't overthink it. Come. It's time to see them. Edward nodded, turned, and retraced his steps. Passing once more through the corridor like a tunnel of time and space, he returned to the great bronze gates. One more step forward, and he would leave the giant king's court. Do not hesitate. Keep walking. Must it be this way? Yes. Will it work? Let us hope so. At last, Edward stepped through the doors. A flood of flames and a forest of thunderbolts crashed down. At the same time, he felt something terribly important being torn from his mind, bringing with it a searing pain. Then a force shoved him hard aside. Behind him, a chain of explosions roared. Crack. Edward hit the ground, scrambled up, and looked back, just in time to see the glow of countless powers fade. In that same instant, Lili, the Lord's deputy in heaven, drove a black blade straight through the black cat's body. Golden blood dripped from the wound. The world fell utterly silent, and only the sound of blood hitting the floor could be heard. Drip, drip, drip. The dripping quickened, turning into the patter of rain. For a fleeting moment, everything blurred. When clarity returned, Edward found himself standing in a strange, dim street. Cold rain poured from the sky. The air was wet and chill, saturated with despair. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? It felt as though he had lost all memory, an empty shell. He looked around blankly, then chose a distant patch of light and began walking toward it. The rain intensified. He grew colder and colder, hugging his arms to his chest as he trembled. No matter how far he walked, the light remained at the same distance, as if he would never reach it. Forget it. Then I won't walk. He chose a tree with relatively dense leaves, curled up at its roots, and stared through the curtain of rain into the black sky, eyes vacant. He tried to think, to analyze his situation, but his mind was blank. Marrow. A faint meow sounded from the side. Startled, he glanced over. Marrow meow marrow. The voice grew more urgent, yet weaker. After a few seconds' hesitation, he stood, pushed aside a pile of dead leaves and twigs, and found a soaked black kitten within. It couldn't have been more than 2 months old, thin, tiny, terribly weak. It looked like it wouldn't last much longer before freezing to death. Sigh, I'm not in much better shape than you, but since I've found you, I'll do what I can. He crouched, reaching to pick it up. Snap. Perhaps out of instinctive fear, the kitten clamped its teeth onto his finger. A faint sting pricked him. He barely reacted, grabbing the scruff with his other hand to make it let go, then, after a moment's hesitation, tucking it into the part of his coat that the rain hadn't soaked yet. Cold. Bitterly cold. He shivered, flicked his bleeding finger, and let the rain wash away the blood. Well, since I've chosen to save you, I might as well try walking on a little farther. Shaking his head helplessly, he set off again along that seemingly endless road. This time, the distant light edged closer with every step. After a dozen minutes, he reached an old stone cottage. Smoke curled from the chimney, a warm, yellow glow spilt through the window, casting a soft halo at the door. It looked comforting. Edward quickened his pace. At the door, the faint scent of food reached him. Knock, knock, knock. He rapped on the wood. Is anyone home? Who is it? A passerby, looking to get out of the rain. May I? After a brief pause, the door creaked open. A black-haired girl of about 20 stood inside. She looked him up and down, then stepped back. Come in. Marrow. The kitten in his coat let out a weak cry. The girl frowned. A cat. Where? He quickly took the little thing out. Found it on the road. If no one helps it, it'll freeze to death. He glanced at the hearth, where flames crackled. May I? He hurried to the fireplace, setting the kitten close enough to feel the warmth. Here. The girl handed him a dry towel. Thank you. He gently dried the kitten and wrapped it snugly. The towel is for you, the girl said. Ah, sorry, I thought. Forget it. She sat on the sofa by the hearth. You're not from our town, are you? I've never seen you. Where are you from? I'm a traveler. Just passing through. And where are you headed? I haven't decided. She nodded slightly, asking nothing more. Marrow, marrow. Revived a little, the black kitten mewed in a series of small cries. The girl frowned. It's hungry. Ah. Then, what do we do? She studied him for a few seconds, then fetched a packet of milk powder from the table, mixed it with warm water in a bowl, and handed it to him. See if it'll drink. Thank you so much. Edward set the bowl before the kitten, unwrapped its towel, and dabbed a little milk at the corner of its mouth with his finger. The little thing licked its lips immediately, then crawled to the bowl and began to drink in earnest. Watching it bury its whole face in the bowl as if someone might steal it at any moment, Edward hesitated, then asked. Ma'am, as I said, I'm a traveler, I wander without purpose, take things as they come, and I can barely look after myself. So, could you possibly take care of this cat for me? Note, 900 power stones for another extra chapter tomorrow. Go, vote. By now, you guys must know that the girl on the book cover is Lilith, right? But have you ever wondered why her eyes are golden in the picture, even though it's mentioned several times that they're lake blue? Chapter 625, Chapter 625, the oldest one in the mirror. Marrow. The kitten suddenly turned its head toward Edward, a trace of confusion flickering in its blue eyes. The girl spoke softly, I don't mind, but since you were the one who saved it, is it really right to just hand it off to someone else? Edward smiled faintly. I'm not abandoning it. I'm just finding it a safer, more suitable place. Anywhere would be better than wandering with me. But, the girl replied, it doesn't seem willing to leave you. Edward chuckled. How could that be? I only found it not long ago, and it just bit me a moment. He stopped mid-sentence. His pant leg had suddenly grown heavier. Looking down, he saw the little creature standing on its hind legs, tiny paws gripping at his trousers, hind legs pushing and scrabbling as it tried to climb up. The girl's calm voice came again. It really likes you. Why not take it with you? Edward lifted the small black cat and set it on his lap. Stroking its head gently, he smiled at the purr that rose from its throat. Forget it. It's better off here. If he really were just a wanderer, taking it along for company would have been harmless. But now, he knew nothing of himself, not even what he was supposed to do next. To bring the kitten with him would only be irresponsible. And yet, he couldn't deny the strange warmth in his chest, the inexplicable sense of familiarity when he looked at the little thing. Time passed slowly. A shaft of golden sunlight poured through the window, casting a soft glow across Edward's face. Turning his head, he realized the rain had stopped without his notice. The sun had broken through the clouds, scattering the gloom. The rain stopped, he murmured, picking up the kitten and handing it toward the girl. I should get going. Please, take care of this little one. Are you sure you don't want to think about it a bit more? No need. He smiled, stood, and walked toward the door. Thank you for letting me stay. Marrow. The black kitten squirmed in the girl's hands, crying out plaintively toward him. Edward couldn't help but smile. Haha, seems even animals take a liking to me. We've only known each other for a short while, yet you're already attached. Maybe, when I regain my memories, I'll come back for you, little one. He pushed open the door and stepped out into the sunlight, waving a casual goodbye. Inside, the girl remained seated silently by the fire, her fingers gliding over the kitten's soft black fur. Her voice was calm, too calm. See. Even your last reason to exist is gone. What's the point in holding on? I did try to persuade him to take you. He was the one who cast you aside. Her tone was gentle, almost tender. So, Lilith, you're not real. Only Lily is real. Stop resisting. Merge with me, only then will we be whole again. As her words flowed softly through the quiet room, the kitten's eyes dimmed. Its small body began to blur, turning translucent, fading as though it might vanish at any moment. Outside, Edward lifted his head toward the bright sun. The depression left by the cold rain and gray sky melted away. His steps felt lighter, even cheerful. He couldn't help but imagine. If he'd taken that little one along, wouldn't the journey have been more interesting? Traveling with a cat as company surely sounded better than walking alone. Like those travel bloggers. Right, that was what they were called, wasn't it? But what name would I give her, if she were mine? He rubbed his chin, thinking. Her fur was completely black, maybe something simple like Batman. Or Catman. Yes, perfect. Catman it is. He snorted with laughter. I must have had a sense of humor before I lost my memory. But no, that wouldn't do. He'd glimpsed her earlier, she was clearly a little female cat. All right then, completely black, tiny, round, maybe Lil Blackie would be better. He turned back toward the fading outline of the stone cottage and murmured. I wonder what name that kind girl will give her. Little Bean. Little Sesame. Little Cole. Tom. Jerry. He was still lost in thought when a small, childish voice echoed faintly in his mind, bright and earnest. Edward, from now on you must call me Miss Lilith. Because I heard that's how people address girls politely, it means respect. Tap. His footsteps halted. Edward. Lilith. Those names, where had he heard them before? Why did they sound so achingly familiar, so dear? He closed his eyes, trying to follow that voice deeper into memory. Pain lanced through his skull as shards of images flashed and vanished, accompanied by that same gentle, laughing voice. Edward, you came back, I've been waiting for you. Edward, Miss Lilith is the smartest kitty in the world. Cats are supposed to be like that, you know. You're really giving me this red flower? Hee hee, Miss Lilith really is the best. Edward, thank you. If it weren't for you, Miss Lilith would have been just like Isabella and the others, wandering, hungry, and cold. As long as Edward's here, Miss Lilith is the cleverest cat. Edward, I'll be waiting for you, in the future. The pain intensified. He groaned, clutching his head. But why were there only fragments? Why couldn't he remember anything else? No matter how much he forgot, there was one truth he felt with absolute certainty. That black cat was important to him. Deeply, indescribably important. He was here because of her. But he'd already found her, hadn't he? So why had he handed her away so easily? No. He had to go back. He turned sharply to return to the cottage. And agony slammed into him, so fierce he nearly fell. He had to go back. Even if it wasn't just for the cat, he needed to reclaim his missing memories. Gritting his teeth, he forced one foot forward. The pain grew into pure torment, like flesh being torn from his bones, like each bone was being shattered one by one. But it wasn't only pain. It was as if something was trying to wake him up. Yet his instincts screamed, not yet. Not before I find that cat. Not before I find Lilith. Finally, he reached the cottage door again. He had to throw his entire weight against it just to press his trembling hand to the wood and force it open. The room that had been warm and bright was now drowned in blackness, an endless abyss waiting to devour anyone who entered. The pain intensified, every nerve screaming the same message. Danger. 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 Turn back. Leave now. But he smiled weakly, shaking his head. If I came here to find Lilith, what's the point of leaving now? He stepped forward, resolute, and walked into the darkness. In an instant, everything vanished. He was swallowed by shadow, wandering through infinite chaos with no sense of direction, no point to follow. Cold, malevolent winds cut across him, threatening to tear away the fragments of memory he had only just recovered. He bit his tongue hard, forcing his mind to stay clear, his steps to stay steady. Minute by minute, he pressed on. And then, in the distance, a faint golden light appeared. He quickened his pace, running toward it. The darkness peeled away as he drew nearer, dissolving like mist before dawn. When the world steadied again, Edward stood by a tranquil lake. On the grassy shore not far away, a little black cat lay sprawled on its back, belly up, basking lazily in the sunlight. Lilith. Edward stepped forward cautiously, inching toward the little black cat. She seemed not to hear him at all, continuing to bask lazily in the sun. Lilith. When he was only a few dozen centimeters away, he crouched and called again, softly. This time the cat finally pricked up her ears, only to glance at him, close her eyes once more, and arch her back in a long, languid stretch. Lilith, is that you? Edward reached out and gently stroked the cat's back. I'm Edward. I am. He wanted to say more, but apart from the fragments he had recalled earlier, his mind remained a blank. I came specifically to find you, he said after a moment's thought. I still don't remember what happened, but I'm certain of this, I have to take you away. If we leave here, if you leave with me, I'll remember everything. So, will you come with me? The black cat rolled over. All right, you didn't object, so I'll take that as a yes, and I. Puffed. A stifled laugh sounded from the side. Hey, why are you negotiating with a cat like it's a serious diplomatic meeting? Edward turned. A face both familiar and unfamiliar came into view. Long black hair. Pretty features. A light shirt and jeans. A faint smile curving her lips. I'm talking to Lilith, he said. Lilith. The girl smiled. She's Lil Cole. I'm Lilith. Edward blinked, looked at the cat, then at the girl, bewildered. So what do you want with me? The girl asked, stepping closer, curiosity bright in her eyes. I'm not sure it's you I'm looking for. I came to find Lilith. I am Lilith. But wasn't Lilith supposed to be a cat? What did you come to do? She pressed, head tilted. I need to take you, no, take Lilith, away. Away. Where? To somewhere safe. But I think it's perfectly safe here. Hands clasped behind her back, she walked to the lake shore and gazed into the distance. Quiet, peaceful, free of all the noise. What's wrong with staying? Edward followed her gaze. A warm breeze drifted by, and the tension that had gripped him loosened. The notion of staying seemed, for a heartbeat, wonderfully appealing. He bit his tongue and steadied himself. Honestly, I've forgotten a lot. But I know this much, I have to take Lilith away. That's very selfish, she huffed. Sounds like it's just what you want. I don't want to leave. You're right, it is selfish, Edward said with a nod. But I have no memories and no morals to weigh it with. Whether it's selfish doesn't matter. I only know I must do this. As he spoke, he scooped up the black cat and, by sheer habit, tucked her against his chest, then turned to go. After a few steps, a thought struck him. He looked back. Are you really Lilith? Edward held out his hand to her. Then you should come with me, too. Why? Because I came to find Lilith. Ah. And that means I should go with you. Because, my name is Edward. Edward frowned, searching for words. Edward and Lilith are supposed to be together. Surprise flickered across the girl's face. In a few seconds it softened into a radiant smile. She took his hand lightly. You're right. Lilith should be with Edward. Fingers clasped, they moved to leave, but Edward stumbled. The hand he held seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, refusing to budge no matter how he pulled. Why did you stop? He asked, frowning, and strained again, only to find he could not move her an inch. She watched him quietly. Are you giving up? No. Drawing a deep breath, he gripped her hand and wrist with both of his, teeth clenched, pouring every ounce of strength into the effort. Move, move. The bright sky suddenly darkened with a heavy pall. The placid lake heaved under a rising gale, and the entire world began to tremble. Edward noticed none of it. He had only one thought, to take this girl called Lilith away. No. Don't you dare. A furious roar crashed from the heavens. A colossal face appeared in the vault above, howling, you will not escape. Edward did not so much as flinch. He drew the girl, little by little, finally making her shift. Behind her, space twisted. What he was doing was peeling her out of this reality. The crushing weight he had felt did not come from the girl, but from the entire world holding her in place. Lilith, you are false. I am real, the face in the sky thundered. The girl, Lilith, tilted her head back, smiling faintly. Strange. I feel like I'm the real one. You've spun childish stories again and again, splintering my soul and devouring it piece by piece. Even now you're not satisfied, you would erase my memories completely and wipe away every trace that I ever existed. When Edward broke in, you used him to stage a farce, to make me despair, to make me stop resisting. The face in the sky burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. You call my play childish and farcical, yet why did you sink into it? Why were you broken down until only this scrap of soul remained? Why did you shut down and give up the moment he handed you over to me? Lilith was silent for a moment. And yet, you still failed. Ha. With only that sliver of soul? Or do you put your faith in this Edward who doesn't even have his memories? Even if Edward forgot everything, Lilith said evenly, he still remembered me. Unlike you, you're the one no one remembers. You are the illusion. No. I, Lily, am real. You are the fiction. With a roar, a wave of black smoke swept down from the horizon, surging toward Edward and Lilith. Everything it touched dissolved into nothing, leaving behind gaping voids. Give up, Lilith. Merge with me, become one with me as the mirrored original creator. Edward answered with a roar of his own. His pace quickened, dragging Lilith free of the world's grip inch by agonizing inch. Boom. A heartbeat before the black smoke reached them, Lilith broke loose. She seized Edward's wrist and leapt, carrying him away from the onrushing dark. In midair, her free hand slapped outward. With a sharp crack, an entire pane of space shattered like glass. Fractures webbed rapidly in all directions until the sky and earth were laced with cracks, then, with a wrenching twist, the world collapsed. Sky, ground, lake, all broke apart, revealing their true visage. Darkness. Darkness. And still, darkness. The world was nothing but endless black. Don't you dare escape. The furious bellow resounded again as a towering figure manifested high above, a woman with a head full of venomous serpents, her features half transformed into something serpentine. She spread her arms wide, and a suffocating malice poured down. Earthquakes. Tsunamis. Floods. Blizzards. Plague. Disease. Curses. Lilith flicked her hand. A mirror appeared out of nowhere, and she stepped through with Edward. Within that mirror's countless facets, they flashed from reflection to reflection, fleeing the Gorgon with dizzying speed. Scritch, creak. All at once, every mirror shattered in unison. Lilith sprang out again, but a forest of new mirrors unfolded before them, innumerable panes, and in each one, a Gorgon stared back. Did you forget? I am the master of the mirror world, the mirrored original creator. Lilith said nothing. She pushed Edward gently behind her, snapped her fingers, and every mirror splintered to dust. Her fingers then danced like a pianist across invisible keys, weaving unseen threads through the entire region. She was just about to step forward when a hand caught her right one, Edward's. Lilith. She turned and smiled, radiant. Edward, have your memories come back? Not all the way. But I'm not the muddle-headed fool from a minute ago. Edward strode past her. Facing the onrushing cataclysm, his figure blurred, then multiplied into hundreds of illusory doors, with himself standing behind each one. An immense, ancient gear manifested behind him, turning slowly. Like the ticking of a second hand, it rotated backwards, tick, tick, tick. Under the boost of fantasy, he unleashed regression. Time itself seemed to reel back, the disasters and plagues hurtling toward them reversed at a speed even faster than they had arrived, surging back upon the Gorgon. At that same instant, Edward's countless avatars unleashed every spell and beyonder power he could muster, pouring them down upon the mirrored original creator. Yet the moment the attacks entered the miasma of pathogens swirling around her, they guttered out and died, not blocked, but sickened to death. Even energies like spells and beyonder ability succumbed, infected by the near-sequence zero Gorgon's authority of disease. This was concept. This was authority. The serpents upon her head writhed and hissed. Lilith. Merge with me. With her shriek, the reversed cataclysm surged forward again. Her eyes saw only Lilith. As for Edward, she treated him as less than air. The world shuddered. Cracked panes of glass appeared everywhere, and from each rift stepped another Gorgon, each not quite alive, bodies bristling with tendrils, every tendril tipped with an eye, some shut, some open. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 626, Chapter 626, Genie gets angry. Lilith immediately conjured another mirror, placing it before Edward. Don't let their eyes meet yours. But she was half a second too slow. The right side of Edward's body had already turned a pale, lifeless gray stone. Edward. I'm fine. He grit his teeth against the agony of the worms of star dying within him, repairing the petrified half of his body as best he could. Glancing down at the door-shaped mark on the back of his hand, he murmured, Lilith, tell me, doesn't the witch pathway have any power that can counter something like this? Yes. Lilith nodded at once. The sun. The sun's power restrains most pathways related to curses and darkness. That was why, in the ancient era, the ancient sun god had been able to single-handedly defeat the old gods who had ruled humanity for millennia, leading mankind into a new epoch. The sun, huh? Edward whispered the word, and suddenly, a tremendous surge of spirituality erupted from his body. A blazing golden sun tore across the heavens, flooding the entire mirror world with light. It lasted only an instant, but that instant was enough. The countless tentacle-ridden Gorgons were burned to ash beneath streams of golden fire, while the brightest of those sunrays pierced straight toward the greatest among them, the mirrored original creator, the colossal Gorgon herself. Aya! Her scream was shrill and piercing as searing pain consumed her. Every mirror around them shattered, followed by a thunderous crack as the very world fractured like a pane of glass splitting apart. Lilith was momentarily stunned. Edward, did you just advance to sequence 0? Nope. Total bluff. He shook his head with a strained grin. It wasn't entirely false, but not real either. What he had done was use the fantasy to reproduce a scene he had once witnessed while visiting the eternal blazing sun's divine kingdom, a technique possible only after his promotion to sequence 2, which allowed him to record and project moments engraved in his memory. But of course, such an illusion was fleeting, he was still only a sequence 2 beyonder. No mere mortal could replicate a god's domain. Come on, he said quietly. We're leaving. What? He grabbed Lilith's hand and began backing away. The door pathway's greatest power is running for your life. I'm not dumb enough to fight to the death in someone else's domain. As he spoke, the door-shaped sigil on his arm flared. A glowing portal manifested before them. We're going straight out. With the fantasy boost, his identity as a planeswalker, and the uniqueness of the door, Edward had more than enough power to open a path directly out of the deepest level of the mirror world. As long as he had a few seconds. Go. They leapt together toward the portal. But the instant Edward's body crossed the threshold, Lilith shoved him forward, violently, propelling him through, while she herself stepped back. Lilith, you. He shouted in alarm, but before he could finish, the door behind him turned to stone, solid, lifeless, gray. Not just the door, everything the Gorgon's eyes fell upon was petrified. Including Lilith. And then, disaster struck. In an instant, a dozen cataclysms broke loose at once. You damnable worm. The Gorgon's voice was ice-cold, filled with loathing. Crack. Lilith's stony form splintered and vanished, revealing it to be a mirror substitute technique. She had walked the razor's edge between life and death more times than one could count. Each time disaster came, she slipped away, barely, but just enough. Lilith, give it up. Dozens of mirrors appeared again, encircling her. In every reflection, a Gorgon raised its right hand, aiming directly at her. Stop wasting time. Then, the Gorgon smirked. Oh. Are you waiting for someone to save you? Someone like Amon Isis. Lilith's face changed slightly. Ah, I see that struck a chord, the Gorgon continued, laughing softly. Then allow me to tell you some bad news, Amon Isis never even made it to the deepest layer of the mirror world. The one you've been seeing all this time. Every Amon Isis you encountered in those little episodes was nothing more than an illusion I crafted through the mirrors. Lilith's lips pressed into a line. Don't believe me. The Gorgon chuckled, lifting her hand. How many do you want? I can give you as many as you like. One by one, the mirrors shifted. In each of them appeared a golden-haired, green-eyed girl, Amon Isis, from each memory, each false encounter. So, stop struggling. From all around, a chorus echoed in unison. Stop struggling. Stop struggling. Stop struggling. Merge with me. Come, now. Each of the countless Amon Isis smiled faintly within her mirror, their voices overlapping in eerie harmony. Lilith, you are false. I am the real one. The colossal Gorgon reached down with a vast, clawed hand toward Lilith. If you stop struggling now, she purred, I might be merciful. I could leave you a sliver of consciousness, let you live on in my place, wearing your own face. I'll avenge you by slaying the primordial demoness. I'll protect that Edward you care for. I'll help you resist the outer gods and survive the apocalypse. Keep dreaming. The enormous hand crashed down like a falling mountain. Lilith twisted aside and again invoked her mirror substitute, vanishing just before impact and reappearing high in the air. But before she could act, dozens of streams of blood burst from her body. Her form went rigid, suspended midair, a strangled cry tearing from her throat. Ah, ah. From every direction, fine invisible threads had pierced through her flesh, suspending her like a puppet. The threads began to wriggle and twist, burrowing into her body like living serpents. Finally caught you. The giant Gorgon's mouth curled into a grin. She dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, pouring down from the heavens, flooding into Lilith's helpless form. Lilith's scream split the air, raw, heart-wrenching, filled with agony. Aya. From this moment on, the Gorgon hissed, Lilith will cease to exist. Aya. I will become the oldest one. The true oldest one. Lilith's body began to fade, her outline turning translucent. Her features slowly shifted, her face, her figure, until, piece by piece, she had become Lily. A smile of triumph blossomed on her face. At last, it's over. But just as she finished speaking, her smile froze. Somehow, a silver mirror had appeared in her hand, its frame carved with intricate, ancient motifs. On either side of the mirror were ornamental eyes, set with black gemstones that gleamed with a deep, mesmerizing luster. Soft light rippled across the mirror's surface, and a line of words shimmered into view. Finally caught you. What? SCHLKK. A pale hand burst through Lily's chest, clutching a still-beating heart. Behind her stood Lilith, smiling gently. Finally caught you. When did you? The first time I used the mirror substitute. Then why did I? Of course I knew Amon Isis hadn't entered, Lilith said with a serene smile. But I only needed her to conceal certain things from me. For example, you wanted to merge with me, to devour my soul and become whole again. But I wanted to use my soul to bind you, even if only for a moment. Her tone turned quiet, dangerous. You thought I came to the mirror world to be like Cheek, trying to claim the title of mirrored original creator. No. In her palm, a golden lamp appeared, small, ornate, shaped like a jeweled pitcher. Magic wishing lamp spirit, she whispered, my second wish is this, draw out a portion of her original creator essence, and bestow it upon that arm bone. She brushed her fingertips along the lamp's surface. Its wick ignited soundlessly, emitting a glow as thick as molten gold. The light rose, flowing upward like syrup, coalescing into a blurred, shimmering golden figure. Not enough, said the figure coldly. That wish alone cannot suffice. She is, after all, the mirrored original creator. Though his tone was mild, the disdain in it was unmistakable. Lilith smiled faintly. Is this revenge? For last time, when I summoned you but didn't make a wish. No. Just the truth, the figure replied blandly. The Gorgon, Lily's, laughter rang out, harsh and triumphant. Ah, I understand now. So that was your plan, to use this to resurrect yourself. But things didn't go as you expected, did they? You did all this for rebirth, yet to complete it, you'll have to die first. Tell me, Lilith, will your precious method still work after you're truly dead? Lilith said nothing. Her grip on the heart in her hand tightened sharply, crack, and Lily screamed. After a moment's silence, Lilith spoke again, voice low and firm. Magic wishing lamp spirit, my second and third wishes are. A second hand closed over the lamp. Let me handle this, Lilith. Her body jolted. She turned. Edward. Why did you come back? Edward flicked a finger against her forehead. You little brat. Just because you've lived a few thousand years longer than me, you think you're stronger, huh? You kicked me out without a word. I fought my way back here to protect you, not the other way around. He smiled, though his tone was half a scold. Sure, I'm not as strong as you, but when it comes to not being afraid to die, who can compete with me? Lilith's voice trembled. No, you can't. The door pathway doesn't have resurrection traits. Even if I die, I might come back, you can't. Edward laid a hand gently on her head. Don't underestimate me, Lilith. Who said I'm only of the door pathway? Trust me, all right. Then he gripped the lamp tightly and said to the golden figure. Genie, grant the wish Lilith just made. I don't care if it counts as 1 wish or 3. The golden figure flickered violently, staring hard at Edward. Then his composure cracked, and his voice rose in fury. You. Your mysteries. You. I don't care who you think I am, Edward interrupted. Just fulfill the damn wish. No. I won't, and I can't. You want to test me? I'll toss you straight into the Sapphire Castle. You'll never see the light of day again, never return to your stars. You. Make. The. Wish. The golden figure seethed, trembling with suppressed rage. Finally, with a strangled sound, he spat out, Your wish has been granted, you damned bastard. I curse you, may you never resurrect again. Note, 1150 power stones for another extra chapter tomorrow. Go, vote. Chapter 627, Bernadette meets Lilith. Bang. In the very next second, Edward's body collapsed, shattering into countless worms of star that scattered like drifting motes of light. Lilith lunged forward in panic, trying to grab hold of him, but her fingers touched only fading specks of starlight. Edward. Lilith, I'll come back for you. His voice lingered faintly as his body dissolved completely into starlight. In the space where he had stood, a door of light appeared, one that led back to the outside world. Almost instantly, words flitted rapidly across the mirror, a road's reflective surface. Go, Lady Lilith. Quickly. She'll break free of your soul's bindings any second now. Hurry. Run for your life. Lilith grabbed a rhodes without hesitation, stepped backwards, and plunged into the glowing door. Lilith. Get back here. The furious roar that followed was cut off as the door slammed shut, sealing the endless wrath of the mirrored original creator within its broken world. A flash of light. And Lilith's vision swam. When it cleared, she was back in her own room, in the real world. Mama. A delighted cry rang out. Mama, you're back. And Lil Chrismona. Lilith exhaled softly and murmured to herself, as if confirming reality with her own voice. I'm back. Where's Mr. Edward? Chrismona asked anxiously. He said he went to look for you. Lilith's gaze softened. Edward will come find me very soon. She smiled faintly. He definitely will. Death for the second time felt almost identical to the first. After the darkness faded, Edward once again stood before that vast, radiant river of stars. Each glittering beam mirrored fragments of memories, screens of flickering lives, each belonging to a different person. All he had to do was step into one of those memory streams, and he would be reborn through the person's recollection of him, though the result would inevitably be shaped by that individual's fixed impression of him. Just like last time, when he resurrected through Bernadette's memories, he'd been reborn as a child, and that lingering childishness had constantly influenced his actions and thoughts. If possible, he didn't want to come back as a child again. But as that thought crossed his mind, another realization struck him. After his promotion to Sequence 2, his humanity had begun to fade rapidly due to a lack of anchors, even that precious, childlike innocence could no longer hold it back. That meant the key to this next resurrection wasn't about avoiding childishness, it was about preserving as much humanity as possible. Yet when he examined the countless memory streams before him, he quickly realized that the question itself had no solution. It was a fundamental law of the mystic world. The higher one ascended through the sequences, the less human one became. That was why the gods needed believers, to anchor their fading humanity, to maintain their sanity and stability. So instead of fretting over how to preserve his humanity, the more practical question was how to rebuild faith as quickly as possible once he revived. In other words, Edward mused dryly, I'm about to start preaching again, huh? He sighed. All right then. What kind of church should I found this time? A pause. Then, deadpan. The Holy Fire Meow Meow Church. Year 1350, future. Capital of Intis, Trier. Bernadette stood quietly on a street both familiar and foreign. Not far ahead was the house where she had grown up, now transformed into a memorial museum for Emperor Roselle Gustav. For a moment, she felt as though nothing had changed, as though it was still yesterday. She lowered her gaze and continued down the cobblestone path she had walked countless times before, until she reached Emerald Street. House number 28 stood at the end, a once grand villa, now long abandoned. It had been empty for decades. After her father's assassination at the White Maple Palace, the Intis Empire collapsed in chaos. Those who had stood closest to Roselle, his loyal supporters, his old friends, had either been executed or fled Trier before the purges reached them. The Sparrow family, despite holding no official positions and living quietly, had been no exception. Their friendship with the late emperor had sealed their fate. From that day on, no one had ever lived in this house again. Bernadette pushed open the creaking iron gate of the overgrown garden. The air smelled of rust and rain-soaked weeds. Each step she took through the tangle of grass stirred another fragment of memory, laughter, warmth, confusion at Mr. Sparrow's sudden disappearance. The swing her father had built for her still hung from the old oak, its wooden seat long since rotted away. Only two rusted chains remained, one longer than the other, clinking faintly in the wind like the echoes of a forgotten childhood. She paused before them for a long moment, then turned toward the villa's door. The very place she had first met Lilith. Creak. The door opened. Standing in the entryway was a girl in a white shirt and jeans, her face bright with a gentle smile. She lifted a hand and waved. Ah, you're here, Lil Bernadette. Lilith stepped forward with light, easy steps, her voice bright and teasing. I thought you'd go to that hotel in Backlund instead. Bernadette's lips pressed into a thin line. It's been a long time, Lilith, sister. Ha 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 ha. Lilith burst into laughter, doubling over as she held her stomach. So formal. You sound like a stranger. Well, it has been more than 100 years, Bernadette replied calmly. And I've grown up since then. Ah. It's been that long. Lilith waved a hand lightly. In an instant, the overgrown weeds around them shimmered and melted away, replaced by the vibrant garden of old. The rusted swing creaked back to life, its seat gleaming as though freshly polished. Lilith sat down and began to sway gently, humming as she looked at Bernadette. Want to join me? You used to fight me for this spot all the time, remember? Bernadette was silent for a moment before saying quietly. I don't swing anymore. Ah, what a pity. Lilith chuckled softly, rocking back and forth. For us beyonders who live long lives, keeping a bit of a young heart is the best way to preserve one's humanity. Bernadette frowned slightly. And yet, you've been sustaining your humanity by stealing the descendants of the sanguine ancestor as anchors, haven't you? Ahem, well, Chris Mona did help me develop a few followers. Lilith gave a few delicate coughs, hiding her smile behind her hand. Anyway, tell me, what brings you here? Where's Mr. Sparrow? I told you already, he's somewhere safe. Mr. Sparrow, he is Edward, isn't he? Lilith nodded. You must have known for a long time. Bernadette hesitated, her eyes clouded with thought. Even so, I still don't really understand. What exactly happened between you two? How did things become this? Oh. Lilith tilted her head, resting her chin on her palm. You mean you haven't guessed at all? I did have my suspicions, Bernadette admitted. When father was assassinated, you two were also targeted in the aftermath. That incident caused Mr. Sparrow to lose his memories, and you were cursed into becoming a cat. She recited her theory in a calm, deliberate tone, though a frown tugged at her brow. But there are still too many inconsistencies that don't add up. So? Bernadette shook her head. I don't know. Lilith laughed softly. You're such an untruthful child. You've already figured it out, haven't you? Bernadette's lips parted but no words came out. That's right, Lilith said brightly. The Mr. Sparrow you first met, and we were from the future. We traveled back through time to the past. So, when you found us back then, it wasn't that we'd lost our memories of you, it was that we truly didn't know you yet. Bernadette's pupils shrank sharply. Indeed, she had once entertained that possibility, but it had always seemed far too absurd. As a mystery prior who ascended through knowledge and mystery, Bernadette prided herself on understanding the hidden laws of the world more deeply than almost anyone alive. And yet, she had never encountered even the slightest credible record of a beyonder being able to truly travel through time. Because such a thing would inevitably lead to the ultimate paradox, the collapse of cause and effect itself. So, Bernadette's voice trembled as she asked softly, "You knew from the beginning that father would be assassinated? That the Intis Empire would fall with his death?" "Yes," Lilith said simply. Bernadette clenched her fists tightly, forcing herself not to ask the obvious. "Then why didn't you stop it?" Because she already knew the answer. To change the past would be to break the chain of time itself, and bring catastrophe to all worlds. After a long silence, she finally asked, barely above a whisper. "Then, father, he really is dead?" Lilith nodded gently. "He is." Bernadette's throat tightened. "But," Lilith added with a mischievous grin, "he's not completely dead." She chuckled softly. This world had a way of turning irony into poetry. Mr. Didn't Live Properly had become Mr. Not Quite Dead, while Mr. Not Quite Dead had turned into Mr. Didn't Live Properly. Lilith hopped lightly off the swing and came to stand before Bernadette. Rising on her toes, she reached out and gently ruffled Bernadette's hair. "Don't worry, Lil Bernadette," she said with a wink. "Give me some time, and let me carry the whole match." Backlund. After receiving the marionettes that Miss Empress had sacrificed to him, Klein felt like he had never been this rich in his entire life. 3 puppets. 2 sequence 5s. 1 sequence 4. With just those 3, Klein thought, he could hold his own against almost any demigod, and still get away in one piece. Of course, as a newly advanced marionettist, he could only control one at a time, so naturally, he chose the strongest, the sequence 4, Brigadier General Conas Kilgore, the deputy director of MI9. A man of immense power and influence within the lone military, now silently turned into Klein's puppet. According to Lilith, this man had been deeply involved in the Great Smog incident, a sinner of the highest order. So Klein felt no guilt about using him. In fact, his military connections would make it far easier to digest his potion and advance further. The other 2 puppets were Ludwell, the once infamous Admiral of Hell, and an unfamiliar beyonder in his 30s whom Klein didn't recognize. For now, they remained safely sealed inside a small leather pouch Lilith had gifted him. "Still don't get how Edward managed to turn living people into marionettes for me to control. Guy acts like he's a marionettist himself," Klein muttered. Marionettists didn't simply control corpses. They took control while the target was still alive, injecting worms of spirit through invisible spirit body threads to seize command of the target's spirit body, astral body, mental body, and ether body, turning them into vessels of their will. Once the process was complete, the target died, yes, but mere corpses couldn't be made into true puppets. He shook his head. There was no point dwelling on it. Better focus on digesting the potion and getting the Bizarro Sorcerer formula first. Taking a deep breath, Klein stood in the open square before St. Samuel Cathedral. Under the power of disguise of a faceless, he gazed up at the monumental cathedral of the Evernight Goddess, bathed in sacred darkness, her divine radiance streaming across the stone plaza. Lilith's words echoed again in his mind. "You mean you didn't know? You, Klein Moretti, have been the Evernight Goddess's blessed from the very beginning." Klein frowned. "I'm a what now?" He rubbed his temples, exasperated. If I really was the goddess's blessed, why didn't I ever know about it? After all, he'd only been with the Nighthawks in Tingen for a few months. The highest-ranking official he'd ever met was the goddess Sword. So when exactly, and why, had he become the Evernight Goddess's blessed? Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 628, Klein and the Notebook. To make sure Lilith wasn't just pulling his leg, Klein even sent a paper crane to ask the Snake of Mercury for confirmation. The reply he got was, to put it mildly, the textual definition of guilty conscience. "It wasn't me who told you that." The phrasing alone practically screamed, yes, it was me. So, Klein pretty much accepted the fact that he really was a blessed of the Evernight Goddess. After 4 or 5 days of hesitation, and conducting multiple divinations atop the grey fog just to be certain, he finally reached a decision. Go to the church. See for himself. He followed the crowd of believers into the grand, solemn St. Samuel Cathedral. Out of caution, he deliberately sat near the back pews, so he could switch places with the marionette he'd left outside at a moment's notice if something went wrong. At the altar stood a middle-aged man in his 40s, wearing a black double-breasted clerical robe. He spoke gently, patiently explaining doctrine to the faithful. This was Bishop Electra, the presiding bishop of St. Samuel Cathedral. The sermon lasted nearly 2 hours. At the end, the congregation made the sign of the sacred emblem across their chests and whispered devoutly, "Praise the Lady." Then came the donation segment, though, of course, it wasn't mandatory. The main contributors were always the nobles, who would casually toss dozens or even hundreds of gold pounds into the donation box, each of them donating more than hundreds of common parishioners combined. Klein originally planned to throw in a token pound or two just for show. but seeing the people in front of him tossing money around like it was pocket change. If he took out a few measly pounds now, wouldn't that stand out far too much? So he clenched his jaw, steeling himself, and pulled out 10 gold notes of £10 each. "Sir," Bishop Electra looked up just as Klein approached and immediately addressed him. Klein tensed, clutching the notes tighter and hurriedly shoving them into the offering box. Then he forced a polite smile and said quickly, "Praise the lady." "Praise the lady." Electra returned the blessing with a nod, but after a brief pause, he added in a lower voice, "Sir," the Archbishop said, "if you ever came, you may proceed directly to see him at the back of the church." "Ah." Klein froze. His gaze drifted reluctantly toward the offering box. "Can I still take that money back?" Electra caught his expression and couldn't help a sigh of admiration. As expected, he thought. This gentleman truly values money just as much as the Archbishop said. In the end, Klein didn't have the heart to ask for his donation back. He followed a priest who guided him through the corridors at the back of the church, eventually entering a quiet meditation chamber, where Archbishop Anthony Stevenson awaited him. "Hello." The Archbishop's tone was mild, his face composed, a polite smile on his lips. "Should I address you as Gairman Sparrow, Sherlock Moriarty, or Klein Moretti?" For a brief, dreadful instant, Klein thought, "I'm really bad at acting as a faceless." One look, and the man had stripped his disguise bare. Thankfully, he hadn't said, "Zhou Mingrui," or worse, "the fool." Otherwise, Klein was sure his soul would have leapt out of his body on the spot. "Just, Klein is fine," he said carefully. "Very well." Anthony nodded slightly. "Then may I still consider you a member of the Church of the Evernight, a Nighthawk?" "Of course." Klein hesitated for a second before hastily adding, "Archbishop, about my resurrection." Anthony raised a hand, cutting him off with a gentle chuckle. "I'm not here to condemn you. As a blessed of the lady, you have no need to explain anything to me." Klein's heart gave a heavy thud. Confirmed. I really am the Evernight goddess's blessed. "All right," Anthony continued. "Come with me. I'll take you behind the Chinese gate to retrieve what you seek." "What I seek?" He meant the Antigonus family notebook, didn't he? Originally, Klein had planned to disguise himself as a wealthy benefactor, slowly earning the church's trust, and eventually sneak a marionette into the catacombs to steal the notebook. But now, they were just giving it to him. That was undeniably a good thing. And yet, Klein couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a fog of mysteries he couldn't quite see through. Why was the Evernight goddess helping him so much? Why did Lilith know he was the goddess's blessed? Did Edward tell her? And how did the goddess even know he wanted the notebook in the first place? Had she been watching him all along? Would a true deity really keep an eye on a mere sequence 5? Klein could think of only one possible explanation, that enigmatic power above the grey fog. He followed Anthony down a spiral staircase leading underground. The air grew colder, quieter. The corridor was dim, the front swallowed in shadow, and the back just as black. Klein couldn't help feeling a thread of tension coil in his chest. He exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to stay calm. Before long, they arrived before a pair of massive iron double doors, their surface engraved with 7 sacred emblems. Nothing mortal could possibly move them. Anthony stepped aside, knocked lightly on the door of the adjoining guard room, and under the supervision of the on-duty Nighthawks, the Chinese gate slowly opened. A deep darkness surged from within. Even though ornate silver candles burned quietly along the walls, their cold, bluish flames only deepened the oppressive silence rather than dispelling it. The moment Klein stepped through the Chinese gate, he felt it, as if countless invisible tendrils slithered out of the darkness, brushing against his skin and sinking into his flesh. A biting chill crept into his bones. "From here on," Archbishop Anthony said evenly, his voice calm and solemn, "you'll have to proceed alone. Take what you came for, and return immediately." Klein froze for a second, confused. "But, I don't even know where it is." "On the second level," the Archbishop replied. "You'll see it when you get there." Though uncertainty gnawed at him, Klein had no choice but to obey. He picked up a nearby oil lantern, lit it, and stepped silently into the depths, the forbidden vault that housed countless sealed artifacts, each carrying power enough to destroy cities or shatter minds. With every step deeper into the darkness, that cold, suffocating air grew heavier. He could almost feel the sealed horrors pressing against the walls, whispering in the void. The flickering blue flame in his lantern cast long shadows that seemed to breathe. Suppressing the instinctive chill crawling up his spine, Klein walked past one stone gate after another. From behind them leaked an endless variety of unsettling sensations, whispers, pressure, ice he couldn't see but felt upon him. Finally, as he descended to the second level, the atmosphere changed. The walls here were crafted from iron, brick, earth, and silver, twisted into strange, almost ritualistic patterns. They divided the vast space into separate chambers, some open, others sealed, each housing a different relic of unimaginable power. Klein kept his gaze fixed forward, reciting silently the Nighthawk discipline. See nothing, hear nothing, think nothing. He dared not let curiosity wander. After passing several closed chambers, his intuition suddenly flared, something was calling to him. He turned instinctively toward his right. There, hidden behind layers of cold air, came the faint sound of a heartbeat. Thump, thump. Slow and deliberate, like the pulse of a slumbering beast. Klein followed the invisible pull, his steps cautious but swift. 2 or 3 minutes later, he found himself standing before a half-open stone door. The room beyond was pitch black, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow light whole. He raised his lantern and stepped closer. The dim glow revealed a bookshelf made entirely of bones, its white surface gleaming eerily. And there, on the top shelf, a black, hard-covered notebook rested quietly, its presence so heavy it felt alive. Klein's heart skipped a beat. The Antigonus family notebook. At once, a voice echoed softly in his ears, unreal yet familiar, chanting rhythmically like a heartbeat. Hornassus, Phlegria, Hornassus, Phlegria. That whisper made his scalp prickle. He'd found it. No doubt about it. Everything had come full circle, right back to the beginning. Months ago, the original Klein Moretti had been driven to suicide by this very book. And in the aftermath of that death, he had crossed into this world, taking Klein's place, inheriting his body, his fate. And now, after all this time, all the struggles, all the deaths and resurrections, he was here again. The same book. The same darkness. A perfect loop. No joy. No fear. Not even excitement. Only calm resignation. He stretched out his gloved hand, his voice low and steady. Let's end this. Just as his fingers brushed the notebook. Clack. A soft, deliberate sound echoed from the doorway, like the step of a boot. Klein froze. He turned sharply toward the sound. Standing in the doorway was a hooded figure, draped in flowing robes of old-fashioned design. Her face was beautiful yet eerily blank, her eyes black as ink, deep, cold, and utterly devoid of light. Recognition struck instantly. It's her. The mysterious woman who had once appeared out of nowhere and saved him from Amon. So, she was a high-ranking member of the Church of the Evernight. Klein hastily bowed. Good evening, madam. Thank you again for rescuing me last time. May I ask, what brings you here? The woman's empty eyes turned toward him. Her voice, when it came, was melodious and detached. Do you seek the Antigonus family notebook, or the higher sequence formula of the seer pathway? Klein blinked, momentarily stunned. What did she mean? The whole reason he wanted the notebook was to divine the formula. After a brief hesitation, he answered honestly. I plan to use the notebook to search for clues about the higher sequence formulas. Then, she said lightly, if there were a faster, simpler way to obtain it, would you try it? Klein's instinct screamed danger. He tensed immediately. I think I'd rather take things slowly and safely, step by step. The woman stared at him silently for a few moments. Then she raised her hand. In an instant, the black notebook vanished from the shelf and reappeared in her hand. Her lips curved faintly. And now? Klein's expression twitched. You've already made the decision for me, and now you're pretending to ask my opinion. Are we playing a game here? Still, she had saved his life once. He sighed. Could you, ask me the question again? Her tone didn't change. If there were a faster way to obtain the formula, would you try it? Klein forced a smile. Of course I would. The woman nodded slightly. Good. Then I wish you success. Before he could respond, the world blurred. Klein watched in horror as his body began to fade, like a pencil sketch being erased by an invisible hand. Within seconds, he was gone. Crap. That was the last thought to cross his mind before his consciousness dissolved into nothingness. Earl Hall's mansion. In the manicured gardens, Earl Hall and his wife were taking an afternoon stroll when a group of men in Church of the Evernights uniforms suddenly entered the grounds. They were the Beyonders assigned to protect the Hall family after the recent assassination attempt. My lord, my lady, the leading clergyman said gravely, we've just received urgent orders. Please come with us to St. Samuel Cathedral immediately. The church and the government are about to conduct a joint air defense exercise. Earl Hall frowned. An air defense drill? Why haven't I heard anything about this? It's a last-minute decision, the priest replied. Purely precautionary. For your family's safety, please come with us right away. For a brief moment, the Earl simply stared at him, then realization dawned. Pack our things. We're leaving for the church. Now. He turned to his butler. Hibbert, where's Audrey? She went out to meet a friend, sir. Bring her back immediately. Yes, sir. Hibbert bowed and hurried off. Lady Hall, noticing her husband's sudden tension, leaned closer. "Dear, what's going on?" The Earl patted her hand gently. "Nothing. It'll all be over soon." He turned his gaze toward the distant direction of the royal palace, and sighed deeply in his heart. "I hope so." Meanwhile, at the Aurora Order's stronghold in Backlund, Audrey sat anxiously in the drawing room beside Priscilla, waiting for Lilith's arrival. This was the meeting time and place they'd agreed upon the day they last parted. If Lilith was going to come, it might as well be now, and Audrey had far too many questions waiting to be answered. Just then, a man in blood-stained armor appeared out of thin air. He strode to the window, crossed his arms, and looked up at the sky, his expression dark and cold. "TCH, took them long enough," he said quietly. "So, it's finally begun. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated." Chapter 629, Farming Aura. A few seconds later, Audrey and Priscilla finally felt the same prickle of foreboding through their spirituality. They hurried to the window, joining the armored men. High above, amidst the layered clouds, dark shadows loomed, dozens upon dozens of airships, their hulls painted in dark brown, lined up in tight formation as they advanced through the skies toward Backlund. On their sides gleamed the red, white, and yellow diagonal stripes of the Fasak Empire's flag. Then, suddenly, a metallic, iron-gray object detached from one of the airships and plummeted downward, slicing through the air with a shrill whistle. Boom. A deafening explosion shattered the long piece of Backlund. The ground trembled, the windows rattled, and a wave of hot air swept through the city. Audrey's emerald green eyes widened in horror, her pupils trembling violently. In that instant, she knew. War had truly begun. Back in time, year. Emerald Street No. The past few days had felt like a dream to Du Bois, the loyal butler of the household. He had thought that after his heart-to-heart conversation with Roselle, after finally helping release the obsession that had plagued him for years, everything would calm down. He would finally be free of worry. Until one morning, after his employer mysteriously disappeared yet again, two visitors arrived unannounced. A woman and a young girl who claimed to be his daughter. The woman was dressed in a black gown, elegant, composed, not exactly breathtaking, but hauntingly familiar. Du Bois immediately recognized her. She was the same woman his master had glanced at just a bit too long during the move a while back. At the time, Du Bois had even suspected that the boss was interested in her type, though the men had vehemently denied it. And now, the woman had shown up with a child in tow, claiming to be his daughter. "You really outdid yourself this time, boss," Du Bois thought incredulously. Even had a daughter hidden away all this time, and still pretended innocence. The little girl accompanying her looked about 7 or 8, delicate and beautiful, almost like a porcelain doll, too perfect to be real. Du Bois had always thought that Roselle's daughter, Bernadette, was already impossibly lovely. But compared to this child, even she fell a little short. Although he couldn't say for certain whether this girl truly belonged to the Sparrow family, Du Bois didn't dare take any chances. He immediately arranged for the highest level of hospitality, instructing every servant to treat the mother and daughter with the utmost respect and care. Still, he refrained from making any public declarations about their identity. Such matters could only be confirmed when the master himself returned. But 3 days passed, and Roselle was still nowhere to be found. Instead, Bernadette showed up. "Who are you?" The moment she reached the front door of the villa, Bernadette saw a girl about her own age, beautiful, radiant, with a mysterious air, and couldn't help asking curiously. The girl smiled sweetly, her eyes narrowing into crescents. She stepped forward, and before Bernadette could react, she reached out and pinched her cheeks, stretching them playfully. "Hello, Lil Bernadette, I've been wanting to meet you for ages." "Ah, so small and soft, exactly how I imagined. You're adorable. Not like in the future, when you're all serious and dignified. MMPH. Wah, what are you, let me go." Bernadette struggled furiously, shaking her head like an angry kitten. "You're too cute." Laughing, the girl finally released her grip and pulled out a lollipop, holding it out with a grin. "Here, a treat from Big Sister Lilith." Bernadette rubbed her reddened cheeks, glaring warily. She refused to take the candy, instead sidestepping and running into the house, calling loudly. "Mr. Sparrow. Mr. Sparrow. I brought you some pastries." "He's not home," Lilith replied, hands clasped behind her back as she followed her in. "Mr. Sparrow." Bernadette ignored her, placing the pastry box neatly on the table before dashing up the stairs to check the study and bedroom. After confirming that Mr. Sparrow truly wasn't there, she stomped down the stairs again. "I told you he's not home," Lilith said cheerfully, lounging on the sofa, and nibbling on one of the pastries. MMPH. Bernadette puffed her cheeks angrily and marched over, snatching the box right out of Lilith's hands. She hugged it protectively behind her back. "That's for Mr. Sparrow. You can't eat it." Feeding him or feeding me, same difference. Lilith tossed the last bite of pastry into her mouth, clapped her hands clean, and grinned brightly. I'm Lilith, by the way. Mr. Sparrow's daughter. Nice to meet you, Lil Bernadette. Bernadette's blue eyes widened like saucers. Mr. Sparrow's daughter. She'd half suspected something the moment she saw her, but hearing it out loud still left her stunned. For a moment, she couldn't even speak. Then, an irrational little sting welled up inside her heart. So that's why Mr. Sparrow hadn't come to visit her these past few days. His real daughter had shown up, and not only that, she was prettier, taller, and more charming. Of course he'd stay home to keep his daughter company. And her? She was just the lonely kid next door. No, scratch that. Not even next door. She didn't even count as a proper neighbor. Well then, Bernadette thought glumly, I guess I shouldn't come by to bother him anymore, I wouldn't want his daughter to misunderstand. After a long silence, she finally plopped down beside Lilith on the sofa and, after some hesitation, handed the pastry box back. Here. Lilith accepted it without formality, plucking out another piece. Then, with an impish smile, she held the lollipop out again. And this, take it. For you. Thank you. Bernadette's small face turned solemn, as though she were trying to make a good impression on this unexpected big sister. She sat upright and asked politely. May I ask, where is Mr. Sparrow? He went out on business. When will he be back? Shouldn't be long. How long is not long? Lilith rested her chin in her hand, pretending to think deeply. Ah, I'd like to know that too. You know how grown-ups are, when they go off on business, their timing's never reliable. That line struck an instant chord with Bernadette, who nodded seriously. That's true. My daddy always says he'll be back soon, and it's never before the next day. Exactly. Same with Edward. Edward. Bernadette tilted her head. Who's Edward? My father, Mr. Sparrow, of course. Ah. But isn't Mr. Sparrow's name Klein? Klein's just his nickname. His full name is Edward. Oh, I see. But, why do you call your father by his name? Lilith tapped her chin thoughtfully, then nodded as though she'd come up with a grand philosophy. It's a habit. Edward said it represents equality between us, that we're not just father and daughter, but also friends. So, calling him by name is more fitting. Having spun that elaborate nonsense, she smiled and threw the question back. What about you? Don't you and your father have that kind of relationship? Or are you in one of those strict, old-fashioned households? Oh, of course not. Bernadette instantly lifted her chin in defiance. My papa and I are very close. We're best friends. I even gave him a nickname. Lilith's eyes widened theatrically. Wow. Impressive. What nickname? Bernadette froze. Her expression twisted in visible distress. It's, something like. She only remembered that other people sometimes called her father son of steam or friend of women, but those hardly seemed like nicknames she could use. Then she frowned. Wait. Why am I suddenly racking my brain to make up a nickname for Daddy? Why does it feel like this Lilith girl's been leading me by the nose the whole time? No way. She only looks a year or two older than me, she can't possibly be that scheming. Yeah. We're both kids. Kids think simple. Kids don't plot. Lilith suddenly clapped her hands. Oh. Speaking of nicknames, I gave Edward one too. What is it? Lilith's lips curved into a mischievous smile. Whenever I want to tell him I like him, I say, old man, we're aura farming today. Bernadette blinked blankly. What does that even mean? It's just a way of greeting your dad affectionately. I'll teach it to you, it's my gift to you. You can, gift a phrase. Lilith waved her hand nonchalantly. Of course. Don't be shy. You're welcome. Bernadette scratched her head in confusion, then said quietly. Thank you. The two girls went on chatting for a while, mostly about their fathers. Lilith eagerly offered all kinds of outlandish advice, and after several rounds of cheerful chatter and imaginary bonding, she finally sent Bernadette home, beaming like a saintly older sister. As soon as the door closed, a familiar voice echoed through the room. You really are something. Edward's calm, slightly weary tone carried from the study. That child's normally clever as a whip, but you just left her completely dazed. Lilith chuckled, walking over to his desk. What can I say? I had to improvise. Besides, wasn't that the point? Keeping you emotionally engaged, slowing down your decaying humanity. She came up beside him and took his cold hand gently into hers, concern softening her tone. How do you feel? Edward sighed, his eyes dark and heavy. The humanity loss isn't the real problem. The The real issue is that after my last death, the madman to the right side effect didn't stop. The life drain continues. He paused. 3 days, at most. After that, I'll die again. Yes. Edward was already alive once more. This time, he had chosen Lilith's memories as his vessel of rebirth. Within 2 days, he'd successfully revived in a stable state, no memory loss, no distortion. But just as he'd feared, no, worse than he'd expected, madman to the right side effect had followed him back. The humanity issue, at least, could be mitigated. With no anchor in this timeline, his rationality was eroding fast, but that was a fixable problem. All he needed was to act quickly, manifest some miracles, gather a group of followers, and re-establish enough faith to stabilize his mind. But this curse was something else entirely. It clung to him like a parasite, undying, unyielding. No matter how many times he died and revived, it would never fade, not until the moment of his true, final death. In other words, the price of reversing madman to the right this time was death itself. A true death. Note, 1450 Power Stones for another extra chapter tomorrow. Go, vote. Chapter 630, Lilith's explanation. Edward had once been rather smug about it. He thought the punishment from madman to the right, which drained his life, wasn't all that bad. After all, it helped him maintain his humanity, and he could always cheat the system through his so-called memory resurrection trick. That smugness now tasted bitter. It's all my fault, Lilith murmured, guilt flashing in her blue eyes. Edward gave her a warm smile, squeezing her slender fingers. How could this possibly be your fault? I was the one who chose to conduct my advancement ritual that way. I simply underestimated the cost of madman to the right. Lilith bit her lip. But I know, Edward, you were in such a rush to complete the ritual because you wanted to reach sequence 2 and enter the mirror world to find me. You wouldn't have risked it otherwise. Edward chuckled softly. And if I hadn't recklessly barged into the mirror world and let the creature use me, you wouldn't have been in danger in the first place. You would have achieved your plan just fine on your own. He sighed. I'm already grateful enough that you don't blame me for nearly getting you killed. That's not true at all. Lilith shook her head hard, her long hair bouncing slightly with the motion. By the time you came to find me, I was already lost inside one of its endless loops. I'd forgotten everything, who I was, why I'd gone there. My consciousness was falling apart. If you hadn't woken me up, I would have been devoured by that thing completely, turned into part of the mirrored original creator itself. She looked up, her expression suddenly soft and serious. Besides, in the end, you were the one who used the magic wish lamp to make the second and third wishes that saved me. If it weren't for you, Edward, I might never have escaped at all. Then, she straightened up, determination shining in her eyes. So from now on, it's my turn to protect you. No matter how hard it is, no matter who I have to face, I'll find a way to save you. Whoa, no need for that kind of drama. Edward quickly raised his hands in mock surrender. Actually, I already have a preliminary idea from my divination. Lilith blinked and leaned closer. Really? What is it? You remember how I told you that inside Sapphira Castle, most of the costs of madman to the right can be offset by the castle itself, right? The reason it didn't work this time was because the owner of Sapphira Castle at that moment was Amon. And the very thing I was reversing was, well, the fact that Amon was the owner. He smiled wryly. That made me and the castle enemies. Naturally, it wouldn't help me bear the price. So. Lilith tilted her head, thinking. If you became the owner of Sapphira Castle again, could you use that to reverse your current price? Edward snorted. Of course not. If I could, I'd be able to cheat infinitely. That'd break the whole system. Then what about your new ability, fantasy? Also no. Well, not entirely. If I could gather enough imagination power, it might be possible in theory. But that would take a very, very long time. Her bright eyes flicked mischievously. Then what if you used madman to the right to reverse and gain enough imagination? Edward tapped her forehead lightly with his finger. That's still cheating the system, you know. Lilith muttered under her breath, puffing her cheeks a little. Well, you can't blame me for brainstorming every possible angle. So what did you divine, exactly? It still involves using Sapphira Castle's power to resist the cost, just in a gentler way. Don't worry, even if it fails, it's fine. Worst case, I die again. I can always come back. Lilith frowned, tilting her head in doubt. Oh, sure. But she didn't look convinced. She knew better. Memory resurrection wasn't infinite. Edward himself had already confirmed it after his last revival. Every time he revived using someone's memories, that person's recollection of him would fade a little more. Eventually, they would forget him completely. And when that happened, he would never be able to resurrect through them again. But he didn't tell Lilith that part. Instead, he ruffled her hair lightly and changed the subject. Enough about me. How about you? How do you feel now? To be fair, even knowing that this little girl was essentially the same Lilith he knew, just in a younger form, he still found it a little disorienting. The mature, ethereal version of her carried the aura of mystery and danger. But this small, lively version felt, well, oddly normal. And endearing. Me. Lilith blinked. Oh, right. I just revived too, didn't I? She lowered her head, inspecting herself for a moment before nodding thoughtfully. Aside from my body being smaller and having to grow up again, everything else seems fine. My sequence, my strength, my memories, they're all intact. The reason I didn't just return to my adult form, Lilith said with a faint, mysterious smile, was to make sure there wouldn't be any lingering side effects. Of course, that was only half the truth. Inside, she was feeling quite smug. Actually, it's because I didn't want Edward to feel awkward if I suddenly appeared as my older self again. Lilith is so thoughtful, always thinking about Edward's comfort. Edward chuckled softly. All right then, can you finally tell me what really happened? All of it. Lilith blinked, pretending not to understand. What do you mean? I mean, how did you learn to split your soul? How did you master this resurrection magic? Everything, from the beginning. Lilith pouted, then sighed dramatically. Well, it all started back when we returned to Hogwarts. When I was studying magic with Susie, I accidentally found something in the library. I thought it was fascinating, so I memorized it. She tilted her head, recalling. Later, it's been, what, over 1,000 years now, one day, Cheek suddenly joined forces with Adam to ambush me. I didn't even realize what was happening until I was already dying. That's when I finally understood, they weren't just teasing me. They truly meant to kill me. And in that exact moment of death, I suddenly remembered the method for splitting one's soul. So, I used my own death as the trigger to forge a Horcrux, and hid it within Cheek's very soul. Edward froze, momentarily speechless. That sounded exactly like the relationship between Voldemort and Harry Potter. And Cheek never noticed you, he asked, incredulous. Nope. Lilith shook her head. Maybe because Cheek immediately used my extracted Beyonder characteristics to ascend to the primordial demoness. Maybe Cheek sensed me, but mistook my presence for remnants of the extracted power. Or maybe, she added after a pause, it was Adam who helped conceal me. Or perhaps it was Will's luck. Or even Ammonize's intervention. Though when I asked them later, every one of them denied it. Edward's brow furrowed. But according to Crismona, you never had much contact with the Evernight goddess, right? So why would she help you now? Especially this time, she even put herself into slumber for your sake. I really don't buy that it was out of kindness. Lilith snorted. Of course not. None of them ever do anything for free. Those guys, each one's darker-hearted than the next. She wagged a finger. Adam does what he does purely for the sake of fighting the apocalypse. I don't agree with his methods, but at least his goal is clear. Ammonize's, though. She sighed. For her, opposing the apocalypse is just incidental. Her real motive is her own ambition. Anyway, she said, waving her hand, that's a whole separate topic. Where was I? Edward prompted, you were saying that when Cheek killed you, you split off a Horcrux and hid inside Cheek's soul. Right. Right, that's it. Lilith nodded eagerly. Because of that Horcrux, my remaining soul survived. I hid myself away for decades to recover, and when I regained enough strength, I re-established contact with Sanguine Ancestor Lilith. With her tacit approval, I assumed her name and seized control over the Sanguine's faith, which allowed me to survive my weakest period. She lifted her chin proudly. Of course, I didn't just take their faith for free. During the War of Four Emperors, if it weren't for my opposition, their entire race would have followed Ornia's proposal to submit to the Night Emperor. And when the Night Emperor and Ornia fell, the Sanguines would have been annihilated as well. So saving half their race definitely earns me at least half a Sanguine Ancestor title, don't you think? Edward couldn't help but smile wryly as she puffed up with self-satisfaction. Anyway, Lilith continued, after that came the Pale Disaster. Cheek and the Underworld Emperor joined forces, but the seven gods united to slay Salinger, the Underworld Emperor, and wound Cheek severely. I took that chance to seize a portion of Cheek's authority through my Horcrux. Then, she said, leaning back with a nostalgic sigh, began my 1,000-year-long escape. I took little Crismona with me and wandered the world, regaining my strength bit by bit. Her smile softened. It wasn't until a few years ago that I finally mastered the power of the mirror world. That gave me strength close to that of a god, at least temporarily, and with that, my full resurrection plan began. First was the servant's flesh, that part's easy. No matter how bad my condition, it's never hard to find a few loyal subordinates willing to fight for me. Naturally, the stronger and more compatible they are, the better the effect. Next came the enemy's blood, and that was the hard part. I couldn't possibly defeat Cheek head-on, let alone extract blood from her. She gave a sly grin. So I took a detour. I deliberately stepped into the trap she set for me. If she couldn't descend directly, the best she could do was perform what I call a half-divine descent. That's my own term, by the way. It's when a god separates part of their flesh to temporarily manifest in the material world. And that was when, beneath Trier, I managed to get her blood. At that, Lilith let out a long sigh. But the final component, the father's bone, was the hardest. She tilted her head and gave Edward a wry smile. You can imagine why. I was a cat. Where was I supposed to find a cat father's bone? And even if I did, an ordinary cat skeleton could never support a ritual of this scale. Then her eyes lit up with pride. So I had a brilliant idea, to use your bone instead. Stop. Edward immediately raised a hand. Before we even talk about whether that would work, where did you get my bone, exactly? Don't tell me you stole one while I was asleep. Lilith giggled. Nope. Actually, before meeting you in the mirror world, I didn't even know you existed in this era. She winked. I got your arm bone from the future, it was handed to my past self and brought it back here when we time traveled. Remember when Grindelwald took a bone from you? That was it. Edward blinked blankly. Wait, you mean, all that happened just to set up this moment? Maybe, Lilith said, stretching lazily. Whether I secretly followed you back to Hogwarts or not, how would I know? That was the future me's doing. But after we returned, the future me passed the bone to my present self. Edward exhaled slowly, shaking his head. So, how exactly did you use my arm bone to complete the resurrection ritual? I mean, I do treat you as my daughter, but still. Lilith's smile softened into something serious, her tone steady and low. That's exactly why I had to go to the mirror world, she said. To find the oldest one in the mirror. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated. Chapter 631, Chapter 631, Evernight Goddess comes to collect her debt. Lilith continued in a calm, deliberate tone, her golden eyes gleaming faintly like molten glass. The oldest one in the mirror was actually something Cheek discovered first. She realized that once the true, original creator awakened, it would uncontrollably draw all things back to it, merging everything into a singular beginning. So, to avoid that uncontrollable convergence, she tried to bypass it. Her plan was to fuse the Red Priest, the primordial Demoness, and the City of Calamity together, then integrate that fusion with the mirrored original creator to create what he called a lesser original creator. She paused, raising a finger. That name was actually my invention, by the way. The lesser original creator wouldn't have been as omnipotent and absolute as the true original creator, but it still would have stood on par with pillars like the Lord of the Mysteries or the God Almighty. Unfortunately for Cheek, her plan had barely begun before the seven gods snuffed it out, and that, incidentally, gave me the chance to seize the mirror's authority. She giggled softly. Ah, I'm rambling again. Anyway, she went on, the mirrored original creator is still the original creator. It carries the same properties, the same essence. All existence in this world evolved from the oldest one. In a way, the oldest one is the father of all things. Edward's eyes brightened slightly with realization. So that means, the wish you made with the magic wish lamp. Exactly. Lilith nodded. I extracted a fragment of the mirrored original creator characteristic and imbued it into your bone. Since the oldest one is the father of all things, giving your bone that trait meant it fulfilled the requirement of the father's bone, both in mystic principle and in emotional significance. That's what allowed my resurrection to succeed. Edward's expression flickered, his mind catching up to the implications. Wait a second. Even if the oldest one is the father of all, Lilith, you're not originally from this world. Lilith's lips curved into a knowing smile. You're forgetting something, Edward. The moment I drank the potion and became a Beyonder, I was bound to this world. The instant I became a Beyonder, I became part of this reality. Therefore, the oldest one naturally became my mystical father too. She shrugged lightly. Of course, back then it was just a theory of mine. But now. Lilith took a graceful step back, twirled once, her hair fluttering in the air, and smiled with radiant confidence. Looking at me now, I'd say it worked perfectly, don't you think? After thousands of years, I've finally returned, fully resurrected. A brand new, more powerful Miss Lilith is back again. Then, her expression softened as she fixed her gaze on Edward. All of this, all that I went through, all that I endured, was for this. To see you again, Edward. To live alongside you. Her tone turned firm, her voice low but unwavering. So I absolutely won't allow anything to happen to you. Edward smiled faintly and flicked her forehead. Didn't I tell you not to underestimate me? Even if you are an ancient existence now, I'm still the one who cheats death for fun. Lilith puffed out her cheeks and said in mock protest. Nope, the Lilith who lived thousands of years is gone. Standing before you now is the newly reborn Miss Lilith, only a few days old. Edward chuckled. Then, Miss New Lilith deserves a gift. He snapped his fingers, and a small red flower appeared between them. With a smile, he tucked it into her hair. A little red flower, for congratulations. Hee hee. Lilith's eyes curved like crescent moons, but she suddenly blinked in surprise. She plucked the flower out and examined it carefully. Ah. Isn't this the one I used to have? That's right, Edward said, smiling. The one you pressed between the pages of your old primary school textbook. But that book, I lost it when I died. Steph gave it to me. Lilith's expression flickered with recognition. Ah, that child, he should be an angel under the true creator by now, right? Edward nodded. Yes. He calls himself the angel of the holy word. Nearly killed me last time, actually. Lilith instantly puffed up with indignation, waving her tiny fist. How dare he? No respect for his elders at all. I'll make sure to teach that boy a lesson for daring to bully my Edward. Edward chuckled. All right, calm down, you little fireball. Then his face grew a bit more serious. Jokes aside, let's get back to the Evernight goddess. You said she helped you, but why? Lilith's expression turned thoughtful. She asked me to go to the forsaken land of the gods, to retrieve something for her. Something she herself doesn't even know the nature of. Edward's pupils contracted sharply. So he was right. That confirmed his suspicion. Both he and Lilith had come from the Harry Potter world, carrying traces of its origin, the kind of breath that divine beings in this world could sense. If the Evernight goddess suspected he was connected to that person, there was no way she would remain indifferent toward Lilith. Lilith tilted her head slightly, sensing his unease. What's wrong, Edward? What are you thinking? The Evernight goddess asked me the same thing, Edward said slowly. She also wanted me to go to the forsaken land of the gods. Lilith's eyes widened slightly. Ah, so it's because we both came from Hogwarts, isn't it? That's part of it, Edward admitted, but not the whole story. When she asked you to go to the forsaken land, did she ever mention anything to you about that person? Lilith blinked. That person. Edward exhaled softly, then told her everything he had heard from both the Evernight goddess and the true creator, the former ancient sun god. That's all I know so far, he concluded. He looked at her quietly. An outsider from beyond this world, yet the oldest one awakened within him. To oppose that awakening, he devised a certain plan. But in that plan, the uniqueness of the door pathway ended up inside me. That's how my pathway diverged from all the others. Lilith rested her chin on her palm, frowning thoughtfully for a long while. Then she suddenly nodded, her tone decisive. Well, the answer seems obvious, doesn't it? Edward, you're that person. Edward let out a long, helpless sigh. That's what I thought at first too. But the ancient sun god was adamant, he said I wasn't. He gave a small, bitter laugh. Honestly, I hope I'm not. I don't want to be the reincarnation of some great being, or worse, a fragment of him. I just want to be myself. His eyes dimmed slightly as he went on. If I'm really just someone else's echo, someone else's design, then what meaning does my existence have? It would mean everything I've experienced, every struggle, every emotion, was just someone's pre-written script. And that. He looked down at his hands, clenching them faintly. That would be worse than death. Lilith pouted, crossing her arms. You're overthinking it, Edward. If the result's good, what's the harm? Then, with the air of someone much older and wiser, she patted him on the shoulder. Ah, Edward, you're still too young. Too idealistic. You haven't seen enough of the world. Edward shot her a deadpan look, pushing her forehead away with a finger. All right, I get it. You've lived longer, you win. Hee hee, didn't I tell you? Miss New Lilith is only a few days old, she teased, sticking out her tongue. Edward chuckled and shook his head, then said seriously. Anyway, if we want to uncover the full truth, we'll have to go there, not just the forsaken land of the gods, but the Chaos Sea itself. Lilith frowned. But didn't the true creator forbid you from going to the forsaken land? There's another way to reach the Chaos Sea, he said. Her eyes lit up instantly. Where? In the outskirts of Backlund, there's an abandoned Sanguine's castle. Beneath it lies a massive bronze door. When I was there once, I felt the same oppressive presence as the Chaos Sea. I'm convinced that door leads directly to it. Lilith didn't hesitate. Then I'm going with you. Edward shook his head at once. No. The Chaos Sea is a pure spheroid. I can go because I'm immune to corruption, you can't. Lilith's lips pursed. And what if something happens to you? Relax, Lilith. I don't have much time left anyway. I might as well use what's left of it to get as much done as I can. She fell silent, staring at him with a faintly trembling lip. Edward smiled and gently ruffled her hair. By the way, did Adam ask you for something similar? She shook her head. No. He only said he'd help me advance to Red Priest. That made Edward's expression instantly harden. Red Priest, he blurted, gripping her shoulders. Lilith, don't jump to the Red Priest pathway. Why? Her brows furrowed, her tone turning defensive. The Demoness pathway is already blocked by Cheek. If I don't take the Red Priest route, how can I ever gain the power to defeat her? Even if I gave up revenge, she continued, her voice cold and rational, Cheek won't let me or Lil Chrismona live. Whether it's to reclaim the authority of the mirror world or to destroy the remaining high-sequence witches, a fight is inevitable. And besides, she added, her tone softening, in just over 100 years, the barrier will fall. Only by becoming Red Priest first can I plan to destroy the natural disasters. That's the only way to survive the Outer God's descent. Edward, becoming Red Priest is my best option. Edward opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. Her reasoning was sound, painfully so. Lilith was thinking about survival, power, and godhood. Meanwhile, his concern was something as small, as selfish, as not wanting to see her become a man. The difference in perspective, in time, in understanding, it was stark and undeniable. He forced a smile, though there was a quiet ache behind it. You're right, he said softly. I'll do my best to reach a level strong enough to protect you before the apocalypse comes. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Forgive my childishness, I just don't want there to ever be a day when Lilith turns into a man. Lilith blinked, startled, and then her lips curved into a bright, tender smile. Fine then, she said softly. Miss Lilith will wait for that day, wait for the day Edward gains the strength to protect me. She extended her pinky. So you must promise me. To stay safe, okay. Edward raised his own pinky with a grin. Pinky promise. Pinky promise. Their fingers had just hooked together when a sudden, icy shadow spread across the room. A figure in a flowing black robe materialized out of the darkness, her beauty divine yet lifeless. Her eyes were void, empty of emotion. It was the Evernight goddess's vessel, her divine descent. Her voice was soft and distant, yet carried the weight of eternity. Lilith, she said calmly, I have fulfilled my part of our bargain. Her gaze shifted slightly, falling on both of them. Now it is time for you to fulfill yours. Note, don't forget to vote. It keeps me motivated.